McGowan has retired and moved on to Georgia, and in her place, I welcome Rebecca McDonough, who's my new assistant. She's just moved down the hall a bit from Steve's office to, well, that's to my office. So we welcome her tonight as at the board meetings, and appreciate what she's doing in our transition in the office.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
And I guess if, before we approve of the agenda, you want to make also a comment about the new mics and
Sure.
for those around.
One of the things that you will see tonight is our microphones are gone from our seats, and they're replaced with 3 smaller mics that are in front of Steve, me, and Dave, as well as the mic that's hanging from the ceiling. And as I've spoken to Herb Haubrick, our tech director, he has assured us that these are the more modern approach to the mics, where they are picking up and specifically designed for meetings like this around a semicircle. Thank you. And so when somebody comes to speak for public comments, they should still use the microphone in the center there, but all of our voices will be picked up. And you also have us cued into the speakers on the wall, which I believe you can hear a little bit better back there now, Dean?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. All right, excellent. I can hear it echoing.
Yeah, it's
a little
different
strange.
now. It is different.
This is my maiden voyage talking with the feedback, so
Well, you're probably
thank you.
closest to it. Okay, so there are no changes to the agenda. Need a motion to approve of the agenda, please.
Move approval of the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Moved by Julie, second by Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. On to public comments. Each month we have the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items that are on this evening's agenda. I do not have any sheets in front of me. However, is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the board, please? Yes, please. And then if you could then, when you at some point provide your name on a piece of paper.
Sure. Hi, my name is Wayne Yuki. I live in the district in Thomas Springfield. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time for this, but I was just really wanting to comment on something I read about in the paper regarding last month's meeting, regarding the policy with the involved bathroom and locker room policy for transgender students. I realize this is a difficult issue, and I especially want to make sure all of the students in the district are getting the best opportunities as they can. But it sounds like the plan or the likelihood is that kids that are identifying with a different gender would then end up using the locker rooms and bathrooms of the gender they identify with. And I was really, really concerned with that idea and that concept. And I'm not sure that it's the best for those students. I'm not sure if it's the best for the rest of the students. I feel like there's potential safety concerns for all the students involved, and just wanted to bring my concern to the board, and I imagine this the conversation will continue as this policy develops, but I thought I'd just bring that now while it's fresh in my mind, and try to follow that as it develops. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Any other comments that anybody wishes to share? Okay, hearing none other, we'll move to item 8, administrative reports. Student reports, this could be one of your last ones, right? Okay.
Just recently, our student council got done with our annual blood drive. It was very successful this year. There's probably upwards of 20 to 30 people that donated blood this year, or that's all that we could fit in this year, but it's still very successful. Also, next week we are having our Teacher Appreciation Week. We're going to go around having baked goods brought to all of our teachers in the school, and we're still kind of planning some other things that we'd like to do for our teachers to show our appreciation.
And also, at the end of the month, last month, we went to our Student Council State Leadership Conference at the Capitol, where all the student councils from the state come down to the concourse, and we all went to little seminars about other things we could do in the community with student council, and we got to just meet up and make connections through student council. And then also we just had our elections, so we have new people coming in as president and vice president, and the new school board reps will be Michaela Rip and Amanda Koenig. Sorry, Amanda Koenig.
Okay. Are there any questions? Well, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for being the representatives that you've been this year. I know that it sometimes interferes with some of your other activities, but we do appreciate the information that you bring, and thank you very much. So.
Bringing Amanda and Michaela to the next meeting.
Okay, so you are.
Perfect.
Also, you are.
Great.
Okay. Oh, that's
Great.
nice. Okay, well, thank you. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
On to item B, board reports and items. First of all, any individuals want to share things that they have done since our last meeting?
I do. It was my pleasure to attend the musical Into the Woods last Thursday. It was an excellent performance. I was blown away by the quality of the voices in particular, and it just was a thoroughly enjoyable performance and very high quality, so congratulations to all of our students and staff that helped pull that together. It's just wonderful to see so many kids involved, so many students, and it just was a pleasure. So if you enjoy theater, and even if you don't think you do, you should try one of these performances. It's worth your time. It was wonderful.
I went to the Friday one, which was better than the Thursday one. But the one thing I gotta say is they were I saw the movie too, and the movie was terrible. And the students were far more energetic in doing the roles than I thought that the movie was. I actually stayed awake during the play, and I didn't stay awake during the movie. So.
Did a good job.
Yep. Anybody else want to share anything? Yes?
I went to the art shows at both the intermediate, Arboretum, and intermediate school, and I just was amazed by the creativity of our kids and the skills that all of our teachers are sharing with the kids and nurturing it. It was just really fun to see their creative skills on display. It's very well done, and kudos to all those teachers.
I went to the Arboretum art show, and it's amazing, you know, the techniques and so forth, and the skill level that these kids have. So it was great. I also attended. We had a kickoff meeting for our innovation center. We had about 50 people there. A lot of energy, not only with the participants, but with the teachers and interaction. And it was really exciting.
Yep.
It was kind of a neat time to be around education.
And tomorrow, since it doesn't quite get as publicly, Forensics is having their awards thing tomorrow night at the high school. So if you want to go, and they did really well at state this year. What was it? They came in 3rd at state. So they did pretty well. So they're going to do their awards tomorrow night if you feel like going.
Good. And I went to Saturday night's musical as well. And I also want to thank, you know, the parents of all the people, so many people behind the scenes. A wonderful show. Also had an opportunity to tour the new intermediate school with Mrs. Hetzel. It's amazing, that learning space and environment, and how it's all just coming together. And so thank you, Cindy, continuing for doing the videos and everything, but there's nothing like walking through the space and watching it happen. So the Innovation Center open house as well. Also the intermediate school art fair, and then the music. And some of you should have all received kind of an invitation for a fused glass art project. That's something which at the intermediate school they had a little table kind of showing what the blocks are going to look like. And though that project is going to be something which the 4th and 5th graders are all involved in, and it will become a part of the new intermediate school. So it's a wonderful, wonderful project. And this week and next week they're all at the vinery and building the blocks, and eventually it's going to be part of the new school. So it's really sweet. We also had the staff recognition banquet on Friday night, which we had the opportunity to recognize people for their years of service. We had 3 Cole Fellowship recipients this year. Elizabeth Pike from the orchestra, Amy Frank from 6th grade, and Jill Stotts from Amy Frank 6th grade, Jill Stotts from 5th grade. to add to a wonderful list of recognized educators in our district. And so it was one of those creative experience months. It was really, really exciting, so.
If I can just piggyback on something that Peggy said, it's a question. So did everybody receive the invite to be part of the Fuse Class project?
Yes.
Because Mel asked me today if I sent it to you, and I didn't remember if that got forwarded or not.
It
So
did.
it did. Thank you very
I
much.
sent in my RSD.
One less, there we go. Good deal.
One less.
It's a very cool thing. Great, thanks.
Okay. Item 2, you have in your packet information on the annual CISA 2 delegate convention. And generally, by this time, we've had our board reorganization, and at the May meeting, we would have committee assignments, and somebody would be chosen to be the CISA 2 representative. However, the meeting is actually on the 17th, which is after, basically the time we won't know who the committees are at that point. And so actually, I'm going to ask the group here, the current individual is Dave Betcher, but if there is anybody who would like to be the representative at CISA 2 for this convention, essentially, when you look at committee assignments and responsibilities, the one responsibility is attending the annual convention. I think you've attended it once. I have as well. Joan might have as well. So what you see in your packet, though, is we do, I mean, it would be good to have a representative at their annual meeting, and if there's anybody who would wish to be appointed to be that representative, or we could keep the current individual if,
I wouldn't be able to attend,
okay.
so hopefully someone else will.
I will not be able to attend.
May 17th. I will know tomorrow after 3 o'clock, when I check whether I'm on jury duty next week or not, if I could attend or not, so. But is there anybody else who would be interested in being the?
Gary's not here, so let's vote.
Well, it's
him
what.
on.
Gary.
What I can do is
Gary.
I'll touch base with Gary, and then also, I might be able to do it depending on.
And I might be able to.
Okay,
I have 2 conflicts I just can't rearrange.
okay, well, I'll follow up then with Joan and Gary. And,
Yeah,
uh,
check your schedule. I might be able to rearrange some things.
Okay.
It's
That's
6:30, I think.
Yes, it's at
Registration.
6:30, and,
Convention starts at 7.
yeah, program's at 7. It's in Windwaters. Okay. Okay, now on to item C, administrative reports, starting with curriculum presentation.
And for our curriculum presentation, that was why I just excused myself for a moment. I don't see our social studies staff here at the moment. So I'm just going to request right now that if we can skip over that item and go to departmental reports. And if Herb, if you could just come forward. Joe Bellamo was planning to be here, but he came and saw me this afternoon and was ill. So I told him to please take care of himself.
Right. This mic is our next mic to be replaced.
Are there any questions? Herb has his report in your packet. Does anyone have any specific questions that you'd like Herb to review from the report that he submitted?
Yeah, basically a lot of my focus this spring has been on getting the intermediate and heritage technology get in line with what we need for those schools. And it's testing. We're almost done with testing. We've been doing a lot of testing this spring.
So is that all on online? The ACT is.
Yeah, every test that we did this spring was online. Yes. Starting with the access test, which was for the
Yep.
English learning.
Where do you do that? Is it right in the room?
Most of them are either in the room lab or we'll wheel in Chromebooks. But yeah, a lot of computers involved.
Mark?
There was just one, as I was reading through what was going on with the new intermediate school,
Sure.
the J boards,
Yes.
is that the transition that each of the remaining buildings will go through in terms of going to J board instead of the smart board, or are there
Yes.
going to be smart boards and J boards?
No, as the smart boards die off, we'll probably replace those with the interactive touch boards. Yeah, the J touch is what we call them.
Okay.
Yeah. What we originally had thought was we would use an interactive projector, which is kind of a hybrid of, it's not really a smart board, but it's not really a touch screen. But this technology will be better total cost of ownership. Plus it will also be, you know, a longer lifespan, and the teachers that are using them seem to really like them.
I got to see one in the classroom. It's just amazing how the kids use them. It's
Yeah.
just very
Yeah.
fun.
So what is the projected life on the Jade Touch board?
Well, it's just like a regular LCD TV, so we could, you know, they'll last 15 years if they're taken care of, which we plan on doing. So our projectors last 7 to 10 years if we're lucky. The original cost of our projectors are about $1,500 to $1,600, but you put in two of the bulbs, which normally we put in a bulb after 2.5, 3 years of use. So you're going to put, you know, about the same amount in bulbs as you are in the purchase of the projector. So you're going to spend $3,000 or more on that projector during its lifespan, and it's only going to last half as much as what this $2,000 interactive board costs. So.
Till the technology changes. and
Right. Well,
changes.
that's right. That's the other part of this is that, you know, we wanted we know that smart boards are an older technology, and we've had those. You know, I installed 24 of them in the intermediate since I've been here. So that technology is getting phased out. We all, you know, that's just part of technology. We know that there's going to be something around the corner that we're going to want, but that doesn't stop us from trying to do our best with what we're trying to do.
So one of the things that Herb is working on is, as we're transitioning with all the building projects, is making sure that our smart boards and any of that technology that we have within spaces that won't be occupied by students next year, we have ways to purpose that within the district, either as we have other devices that go out, we have a place to replace that. So he's been working on very diligently trying to make sure we utilize what we have as well throughout the district.
Yeah. Certainly. Yes.
Have you, I know that they put a J Touch at intermediate, because I also
Mhm.
did walk through and saw one up
Yep.
there in one of the more finished classrooms. Have you tested that? When I was out there,
Mhm.
they didn't have the electricity to it, or I don't know.
Right. Right.
They weren't able to turn
You're talking
it
about
on.
right at the intermediate, the
Yes.
new intermediate.
Yeah, at the new intermediate.
Yes.
Have you tested that with the amount of natural light in those buildings?
Yes.
And does that work?
Well, it depends. There's no like clear-cut answer to that question. But what we did do, because we are concerned about that, is instead of purchasing for the classroom units, we purchased a non-glare surface. So the surface that you guys have seen is gloss. You know, it's like a regular TV, so there is a certain amount of glare. With the anti-glare surface and where we're putting them in the room, I think that's not going to be as big of a concern. But we did that mock-up just because we wanted to see how much glare there would be.
Yeah, I
So,
wondered if that all got a chance to get turned on.
right.
And
Did-
we don't have any plan for window coverings on any of the natural light.
Blackout screens or anything?
There's a few of the classrooms,
Yeah.
I believe, that, I think there's
Yeah.
one classroom in every pod or every neighborhood. Is
Yes.
my correct term, neighborhood? Is, make sure I get that right. I think one of them has a blackout room, and that's for some science purposes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the light in the room would have still been a concern with projectors.
Yeah,
And so,
I know, yeah.
so,
I
you know,
just
that,
wondered.
it's,
I love all that natural light, but all of a sudden you have
Exactly.
this
Right.
technology and
right.
it can defeat, I mean, that can be a
Sure.
conflict.
It's kind of like this room. Oftentimes you have to turn off the front bank of lights to make sure that this projector can be seen from the back. It'll somewhat be the same thing. And we've talked to the teachers. The students are going to be a lot more mobile in the classroom, so they can move their desks closer because they're going to be on wheels. So there's, you know, I think in the end, this is going to be a very good solution for a long time for us. But until it's in place in a room with teachers and students, there's gonna be a little bit of, okay, let's see how this works. But if there were projectors in there with all that light coming in from, we would probably have to dim lights.
Yeah, I just wondered if we should think of some type of,
Some screening or something, yeah,
something on those windows to.
sure.
But
Definitely been a conversation.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like at the high school when, where, those first offices are right near the entrance for one. I
Yes.
think it's like, well, you were baking in there for one, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, we will. Anything else?
Any other questions for her?
Thanks, Herb.
You bet, thank you.
On the facilities report, I guess there's one item that, do you want to explain the Waunakee utilities?
Sure. Probably about a month ago when we had those really strong winds came through, one of the things that we had that occurred as a result of that was our JV baseball field where they have the netting that is held up. It actually blew the light poles because they're held up by old telephone poles. And those were on our facility maintenance list to replace at a cost of about $25,000 to replace them. Those blew over in the wind. The village noticed that they blew over at the same time we were assessing them, and Waunakee Utilities came out, had some poles, and put them in for us and did not charge us. So we replaced an item off of our maintenance list with new to us poles that have really solved that solution. They brought their crews up, they dug them in, they put them in. They actually had the equipment to pull out the broken parts. So that was it was a great partnership piece, and we appreciate their assistance.
I guess if there's any other questions on Joe's report, then they can probably email him.
Right. I think if there's any questions on Joe's report, you can why don't you contact Steve or I, we'll make sure we get the questions answered.
Okay, on to the Cooper Scholarship.
Cooper
comment.
Scholarship is just an update. I think this is something that comes before you every year per the requirements of the scholarship. And it comes here with the idea being that it's to have a committee that is reviewing the funds and then having a recommendation come to this board for final approval and release. The committee has, in their review of it, does not feel that there are sufficient funds in the account this year. So they are holding off on awarding that this year, and we'll be coming back to it next year. They also believe that there will be some other donations that will be able to accompany that. Yes.
I'm sorry, I should have brought that up, but when I saw that, I just think how unfortunate it is for whatever senior class that is. Is there nothing that could be done? I know in years past, we've given away more than one.
Yeah. Do you know much about, Brian or Steve, do you know much about the process or what took place with the Cooper Scholarship, and is any discussions that were part of that? Don't mean to put you on the spot, I didn't know.
It's something that's normally funded by investment, correct? So I'm
It's
presuming
funded,
the
yes.
investment didn't throw off enough cash, is that what
It's funded by the
happened?
interest. I mean, the principal, and you correct me if I'm wrong here too, but the principal, not me, the principal of the
Yes. Good one.
there's a base that needs to be kept there that cannot be used to support the student scholarships. And so the amount of interest earned was so small this year that there just wasn't sufficient funds to be able to fund the scholarship. I don't know if it's an appropriate time to interject this or not. There was, however, a benefactor that did provide some funding for a scholarship. You might jumping ahead here.
No, you're okay.
Okay. With Mr. Robinson's retirement. And so they asked that Mr. Robinson take a look at that endowment, if you will, that they provided. And there was discussion within the framework of the music department, just like there would have been around the Cooper Scholarship. So while it will not be Cooper Scholarship dollars, they're able to fund some continuing education for our students. There is some funding that is there.
That was exactly my hope.
Right,
So
but
that's
again,
wonderful.
This came from a private party in the
Yep.
community that was willing to do that and felt it was an appropriate time to do it with Mr. Robinson.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you, Brian.
And I had placed this on here, this is something we always vote on at this time, and just to give you an update of where that's at, so hopefully we'll be able to bring that back next year thank you for adding that, Brian. I think that's helpful.
Is this something that's like actively managed? Do we need to look at how it's invested?
So the scholarship funds are invested at the State Bank of Cross Plains in a CD, and the returns for the investment that we made last June were just very, very low. It is certainly something we can take a look at, but we've always just looked at bank CDs. We do have a few other options in board policies that we've stayed away from. But the bank CD market last June we renewed was dismal, and we just didn't, in that arena, didn't have much of an opportunity for investment returns. We will do quite a bit better this June than we did last June. The rates are probably 3 times what we received last year right now, so the picture will get better. It's just this past 12 months was pretty tough.
Thank you.
Item 4, Dane County New Teacher Project Shared Services Contract. This is something that we review each year.
We reviewed this every year. This is actually one that we're the fiscal agent for, so when Steve presents the budget at the annual meeting, he's always showing you a part that is an impact of dollars that are associated with Dane County New Teacher Project. This is actually a project that I see obviously being helping our new teachers. Tim Momartz is also a big part of that and provides different services that also assist with programs for principals, etc. So it's a program we would definitely like to continue our partnership in and recommend approval of this consortium.
Move approval of the Dane County New Teacher Project Shared Services
Second.
contract.
Moved by Julie, seconded by Mark. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Finance reports. Starting with the monthly finance reports.
Thank you, Peggy. In your board book, you will see the 3 typical monthly financial reports. One of them is on the referendum, the November 4th, 2014 referendum funds. The second one is the budget status report showing all of the district's budgets as of the end of April. And the third one is the cash reconciliation report showing all the district's bank accounts and all of the activity through the end of March 2016. And I'd be happy to answer questions on any of those 3 reports.
If there are no questions, we need a motion to approve of the monthly reports as presented.
Move approval of the monthly finance reports.
I'll second it. Moved by Joe, seconded by myself. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Open enrollment applications.
So in your board book packet, there were a couple of documents that we attached for you under this agenda item. There was a cover memo which really provides more of a big picture look at the open enrollment process. And then there was a detailed spreadsheet for students in and then a detailed spreadsheet for students out. I think the important thing to keep in mind with open enrollment is back in January, as a school board, you really made the determination as the amount of spaces that we have available in each grade. If you can remember the dialogue as an example, the board changed the 4K total from 40 down to 30. So when you make those decisions in January, really the applications just follow that process. So a good example would be the 4K. You approve 30 openings. We can approve up to 30 applications. If there were more than 30, which there isn't this year, then they would go into a waiting list. If a student put in an application for a grade that we already said was full, as an example, then by board policy, we would not accept that application. As far as totals, as listed in the cover memo, there were 93 student applications in. That's down a bit from last year. And we had 31 applications out, which was very similar to what we had last year. I listed the breakout for the out students. 8 of them are currently attending schools in a different district. What that means is they're going to be moving here and they want to remain where they are. So 8 of the 31 are just looking to stay there. 11 of the students are currently enrolled in the district, and 7 of the students will be in 4K, so they never attended in the first place. 36 of the open enrollment applications in would be denied because of the decision in January that space is not available. And then there's other information listed in the cover memo, like the total number of students we have in, the total number of students we have out, and some financial information about the program. We are recommending approval or denial of the open enrollment applications as listed in the attachment. The students in attachment has a board policy column on the far right-hand side. So either yes or no. The students out, we are recommending that all students out be allowed to move out. And one thing to note, for the 16-17 school year, students with IEPs will now have an automatic $12,000 transfer in or out. There will no longer be a billing of additional services above and beyond that amount. So in Waunakee's case, we have more special ed students in than we have out, which is going to be a positive for the 16-17 financial for the budget, as most of the students in actually do not cost the $12,000 that the state is paying. It's intended to be an average, but in our case, we don't have costs that high for the students in, so that'll be a positive for our budget next year. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the cover memo or either the in and out lists that were included in board book.
In the students who enroll out, do they have to reapply every year?
So the students that enroll out in the district that you end up going to, by state law, they can require one reapplication
Like we do?
at some transition. So a middle school student who goes out could be required to reapply entering high school. So at only at one point in the process, the other district could ask them to reapply.
But do they always, do the students who apply out, do we always get their name on the list?
Oh,
if
I
they're
see what you're
out?
saying. Just their initial,
Just the first time they
yes,
ask?
yes.
And if they're out and they stay out, we don't see them again?
yep, that's correct.
So at some point, could we have a total list of who's out?
Oh, absolutely, yep.
Just for information?
I can certainly do that. You want to know what school they're going to? and-
No, I just would like a total
list.
student that are out.
Actually, I'd be interested if the outs are, how many of them are virtual schools?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I mean, there are sometimes there's some interesting insights into where they're going,
Yeah,
you know, in
yeah.
terms of our own
Absolutely, we
assessment.
can get that out. Mhm.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the open enrollment information and the list that's attached?
So Steve, from the number that you provided, 176, you said they only have to apply, we can only ask them to apply one additional time. So are there then numbers not included in the 176 who have now just been assumed part of our population because they don't have to apply, or are these both applicants and
Current
guaranteed
ones.
spots?
Sure, good question. So the 176 would be those that would be returning, and we've not asked them to reapply for
Okay.
next year. The 93 are the total applications in, and of the 93 applications in, the policy and the board decision in January would suggest that 36 of those applications not be approved.
Right.
The remainder, the largest number is actually 4K again. So we typically have about 30 applications in. And then the number of openings we happen to have approved in 9th grade, we did receive those requests as well. So the few openings that we did have, we did then get requests from parents to enroll in those grades.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then we need to take action on the recommended applications as listed in the attachment.
Move approval of the open enrollment applications as listed and recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll give this one to Mark. So the motion's by Julie, seconded by Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Go back to social studies.
And I see we can go back to social studies now before moving on to other items.
Yes, can I pull something up on the computer quickly?
Sure can.
Awesome. Okay.
So David's going to take a moment, with Rebecca to pull up a presentation he provided the curriculum committee a few weeks ago. And so in the Prezi, kind of to foreshadow this, it's kind of like the trailer, it's going to try to cover some of the new courses and the major areas of social studies has been working on for the last year or two. It'll take 8 to 10 minutes for David to share, but of course, if you have any questions for him, either based on what's in the Prezi or other pieces, David, of course, is happy to answer any questions you might have. And so, once this loads, David's going to take you through what's happening in the wonderful world of social studies.
I'm just gonna check to see if that works. Okay.
I'm going to yield the floor to David.
Nice.
First off, whatever good graces I have potentially forged within the last 4 years, if I could use that now, I apologize. When Tim called me, I was hoping that he was going to invite me out for a cocktail or something, and that wasn't it. So I was making perch with brown butter for my wife and her friend who's moving out to Colorado. But anyway, I apologize for my tardiness. But I'm here to I'm sorry, what?
Did you bring some for us?
No, they ate it all. They worked real well, yeah. But I can, if you ever want to stop by my classroom sometime, just let me know. I can't make it in the classroom, but I can bring you some. Anyway, what I'll talk about are just some updates that we have, and then we'll talk a little bit about new curriculum, new classes, talk to you a little bit about some data, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me during or afterwards as well. So the first key component, I guess, of our high school social studies was that last year was the first year in AP US history that we moved from having it as a one-semester elective addition to our US history curriculum to being a either-or type scenario where students have the choice of whether or not they want to take US history or AP US history. So I just kind of gave you some data and results from how that went the first year. So we had 75% of our students scored a 3 or above, which is nearly all schools consider as passing, or at least would be eligible for college credit. The year before, as you can see, was 54.5% and 59% for the state average last year. So I think we did pretty well compared to how the state does and how the state has historically done. The other thing too was the number of students who enrolled and actually took the exam. We had 160 last year versus 33 in 2014, and I guess as amazing as that might, as nice as that might look, I think the one caveat is that we had kind of double enrollment because that was the transition year where sophomores and juniors would be
Good
taking
point.
it. This year we had 100 students enrolled in AP US History, and the test was just last Friday. I want to say that I don't think there was a kid that didn't take it. I think it was about 100. I would have to double check for you. So yeah, I think that class is going well. I think that having that as a whole year seems to be paying some dividends, and we'll see what the data looks like this year when it comes out. So that's our AP US History. AP Macroeconomics, we don't have any results yet. That test is on Wednesday, but our test enrollment went up to 81% of the students that took the class. We had 52 out of, I want to say, I have to do the math, but I think 63 or 64 were enrolled in the class, which by sheer number is a lot more than in previous years. I know that last year I think was a little bit of an asterisk because with John retiring and bringing in somebody, a long-term sub to take that, I think many students were a little worried about or apprehensive about taking the test, but we're trying to grow that. We had 2 sections of it this year, and next year we have numbers already, and we have 3 sections of that class. So we really try to get everyone to take the test. We really want everybody to try to take the test that enrolls in the class. What else? AP Psychology, we have some data on that as well. Last year we had a 93.4% pass rate. 91 students took the exam, which was up from the year before with 80. The state average for that exam is about 76%, and the pass rate has climbed actually. I went back a few years, and I can give you this data if you want to, but it's gone up pretty much every year since about 2012, which is also correlated to the time that I came to Waunakee, but as they teach in AP Psychology, correlation does not necessarily equal causation, and I do not teach that class either. So. Okay, but the program continues to grow. We have 7 sections next year. We had 4, I think, this year. So our psychology department is doing not department, but our psychology discipline is doing very well, and we also have the elective issues in psychology as well. I didn't want to spend the whole, I know I spent all my day in the high school, but I didn't want to spend the whole time talking about the high school, so I want to make sure I had some data for you to look at from the middle school level as well. So we had our WKCE social studies results from last year. We had, in the middle school, they're doing a really nice job. They're at 96.4% proficient, about 12% over the state average, and in high school, we're about 9% over the state average as well. And that test has changed a little bit. It's called the forward test now, and we're currently working on integrating that test within our actual classes rather than having like a 2 or 3 hour late start. So we're trying to work on the infrastructure. It's been a little bit of a learning curve, probably mostly for myself, but they're supporting me. So we're working on getting that done. But that's in progress right now. It will be happening in May. So that's for the 10th graders. New courses at the high school. This year we had AP US Politics and Government, and we had 3 sections during its first year, which was this year. So that course runs every other year as it's written right now in the curriculum, or in the course book. Next year we have AP European History, which has 2 sections during its first year is what we had for our enrollment. And then also the American Conflict, US Military History and Foreign Policy, which was too big to put all in the course book as a title, so it's just called American Conflict. But if you want the whole thing, there it is. But it had 4 sections students signed up for, enrollment a little bit over 100 students for its first year as well. So that's something that we'll be working on in terms of new classes. There was also a sociology class that was passed as a new class, and the department made a decision not to go ahead and run that just yet. So that's something that'll probably occur the following year, 17-18. So that's in there too. So other things. Let me see if that goes. Does that go a little? Oh yes. Okay. So the citizenship test is required for beginning with the class of 2017. So this entire year we've been kind of working on figuring out how to implement that, and it's been a whole department 7 through 12 venture. The 8th grade teachers were really good about showing the high school teachers how to use Kia, which is like a online quiz interface, and they had created the whole test on there, and then they gave it to a whole crop of 8th graders, and then that same day we found out that under the law it has to be given in high school, so none of that counted. But I think about like 95% of the kids that took it first time passed. So we started doing that in the high school, and we gave it to the juniors. I think it still has to be given to the juniors this semester because we were trying to figure out what courses like all the juniors take, or what most of the juniors take. And right now they're in a World History 2 class, but it's half of them took it first semester and the other half take it this semester. And then in US History classes, we're currently doing that test with the sophomores, which we're hoping is going to be like the long-term solution, is to give it sometime during the sophomore year using that electronic interface. And we're still working on the infrastructure for how to report out who is passed and not passed. So we're trying to work with the tech department on Infinite Campus, working on getting something on the transcript or something like that. And that's been kind of one of the sticky points that I don't know a whole lot about right now, but that's what we're working on.
talked about the quote-unquote new forward test, which is the WKCE with a cool name. And we're working on that. It said coming in May because the time that I first presented this was before that, but we're currently in the midst of that. A couple teachers have already given it. A couple more will be giving it in the next couple weeks or so. And then kind of on the horizon, we did some PD this year on what's called the National Council for the Social Studies C3 framework, which is kind of like social studies mixed with Common Core, mixed with some literacy skills and some inquiry and research and things like that. And it was all put together. It's been a few years now. I think it came out about 2013 or so. So we've been trying to work on that. And what it really focuses on, it has 4 components. They talk about developing questions for research and inquiry, using disciplinary strategies and skills for solving or finding answers to those questions, communicating those questions, whether it be in like writing or speaking and listening or discussion, something like that, and then taking civic action, which is the first one and the 4th one. We feel like 2 and 3 we kind of have a fairly good handle on in our classes right now, but we're really trying to work on helping students develop good questions and then also what to do with those answers to become active citizens in society. So that's part of what's called the C3 framework. We've also worked a little bit on how we can develop our writing throughout the 7 to 12 curriculum and looking at what writing types of disciplinary writing assignments are happening in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and then kind of beyond that, and how we can kind of scaffold skills throughout the different years as we do that and make sure we have some continuity and some cohesiveness, or cohesion, I should say, within our department. So those are our big things. I don't think I had anything more. No, it just goes back out to the world. So that's that's the big stuff. But I would love to answer any questions that you have or take any suggestions or feedback at this time if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to congratulate your department on all the work that they've done to try to develop new courses that are meeting student needs and requests. And I think it's amazing, all the work that's gone in the last couple years in particular. It's very exciting to see students choosing what you're offering. So
we appreciate that.
Good job.
Yeah, we were just, we had applicants for a job and we were interviewing, and one thing they would ask is, what's interesting about Waunakee Social Studies, and I said I think it's a good time of transition where we're trying new things and we're kind of in flux a little bit, so thank you. Appreciate that feedback.
Any other comments? I'm going to echo what Julie said, and also I think that's really neat stuff in that C3 framework. You know, particularly when it comes to what type of questions should you ask, how to interpret the stuff that's in front of you, and then what are you going to do with what you learn. I mean, that's life skills right there, and people who will be responsible citizens when they leave our doors.
And that's something that, looking forward, we would really appreciate having more development on in our discipline specifically, and trying to find avenues for that,
Yep.
or whatever connections we have. So, yeah, we would really appreciate support for developing ourselves professionally in that area.
Everybody can
I'd like to
Yeah,
echo
Mark.
too that I don't know if the whole board was privy to the background on course development, but the fact that you predicated not just on where as professionals you'd like to go, but using the student surveys that you identified where the strongest points of interest were, so it was a really nice combination. So
Yeah, we did. We
kudos
did
to you and
elicit
your
student
department.
feedback in order to develop those courses so that they didn't kind of come out of nowhere. We don't want to do that. So, yeah, that's what they want to take, and we're trying to meet those needs for student electives.
Do you have a question?
Anybody else have any comments? My only piece was, I think you guys have all done a great job, and I know you've done a good job leading that group and having these discussions, so please send that back. The other piece that I often hear, and this is about you personally, a lot of kids connect really well with you. And after seeing you dance with the staff dance team at the Relay for Life piece, I now understand fully why.
There's some zoomed in pictures in like high definition that aren't very flattering.
HD does that.
Yeah.
My dance face looks like I'm grinding my teeth in the midst of a nightmare.
Your
Yeah.
enthusiasm's infectious.
Well, I appreciate
It's
that. I
wonderful.
hope it doesn't go away with age. Sometimes I hope I don't. It's not all because I'm like 27, but
Keep on keeping on.
Yeah, you're doing
All right,
great.
now I'm speaking into a microphone about my personal memoirs. All right, well, I apologize again for my tardiness. Thank you for waiting.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Thanks.
You can get the lights.
Go home and enjoy dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just, I'll just exit out of it very quickly.
And on to announcements.
The announcements I have are just some celebrations tonight for some of our high school students who are part of the 2017 National Merit Scholarship Competition and are moving forward in that process. So Ben Calkins, Braden Helwig, Nicholas Mott, Jade Roth, Dan Steinel, Grace Van Dielen, Vivian Willems, and Sarah Warner. So congratulations to those students for being recognized in that respect for their accomplishments.
I thought it was also kind of interesting to know there's more boys than girls this time, so
Mhm.
that's kind of a new trend for us, so
That is.
go guys.
Exactly. Thanks, Julie.
Okay, on to committee reports, starting with budget. Okay, Steve, you're gonna have it?
Sure. So the first agenda item for consideration for the full board tonight is a review of the first draft of the 2016-17 budget. There are two documents that are attached. We're probably going to focus most on just one of the two. The two that are attached is a budget narrative that Randy put together, which really provides an overview of the budget but primarily focusing in on the new positions that are reflected in the larger first draft of the budget. Page 11 really lists all the new positions, and Randy took an opportunity to really expand on that and share some additional information with you. The reason for doing that is we have a lot going on at this point because of the referendum, and just as a reminder, in November 2014, there was an operational referendum question besides the construction question, and that is phased in over a 4-year period of time. So in 2016-17 is the third year of those funds phasing in, but the first year of the new intermediate school actually opening. So we had been building up the funds, so this is the second year building it up for the new school to open. And now you see the positions coming forward that are necessary for the opening of that school, as well as some of the expanded spaces at Heritage and Prairie. So because of how much we have going on, Randy took the time to put together that narrative, which really shows kind of that information in specific detail. And Randy, I don't know if you wanted to go through some of that or just highlight for board members some of the
I think there's just a
larger
few
items.
things. I think as Steve articulated, you can see on the bullet points really the parameters that Steve worked with that are really coming out of like the revenue cap and the categorical aids and the 0% or the $0 per student base for 15-17 budget, the categorical aid of $100 per student increase, and then the student count projected to increase by 66 students. I think those were the initial parameters that we looked at as we move forward. You'll see that we have an early projection of our tax increase of the 6.4%. That's actually lower than we projected because that also includes our referendum dollars in there. That's everything in total with regards to our budget plus the phasing in pieces of our referendum project. You will see that we've also, I really looked at this from a couple different perspectives and looking at the big areas that we had to concentrate on. Salary and benefits is obviously one aspect of that. We've put that as part of what I'm titling our district budget. I've also broken out some items in here, our district funds with regards to referendum funds, and then I've also have a statement in here just about district contingency. And the reason I broke those out in 3 different ways is that I think that in our minds as we were working through them and trying to determine how we could maximize the dollars that we have to the best of our advantage, we had to look at them in those different capacities. Because the district dollars, think of those as, if we didn't have a referendum happening, we were just looking at what was occurring with our revenue caps and categorical aids, what was our value in dollars that we'd be having to work with. And those can be used across the whole district. You then start to look at things that are more associated with the referendum. So that was tied to, obviously, our growth in the schools that were impacted at Prairie, the intermediate, and Heritage. It also allowed us for some aspects that were operationally for custodial, maintenance, and technology. And one of the things that Steve took quite a bit of time to do was when he put the projections together for the referendum, it was based on some square footage numbers and some projections of what we thought our needs would be and what our costs would be. As we've moved through the process, he's now been able to work with our engineers to get a more specific model of what do we anticipate for our heating and cooling costs, our electrical costs, all of those pieces that are associated with it. Now that we have the specific square footage, we can assign what our staffing is per square footage from our facilities and our maintenance staff, and we can also do the same with our IT staff. Once he did that, he realized that we also have some additional latitude within the dollars that we have. And so those were the areas that we've been able to look at. Where are some of the growth areas that we have staffing-wise that are tied into those specific schools? So you'll see, for example, the nature of the Heritage Intermediate Complex, with the intermediate school being in a different location, requires us to look at some of our staffing differently when you have shared staff. So that's the math interventionist, the half-time at each school as a result of some changes in our dynamics. I was also adding in a half-time math interventionist at Arboretum. That was paid for out of district funds because that was not a referendum school. When you start to look at things like the Prairie Elm assistant principal, I think that was an area that I felt for the last few years I've talked to you about as an upcoming need. It's one that I've heard from staff as far as concerns of just the magnitude of work that we have going. We have, in the writing of this, I asked Julie what our head count was at Prairie. We're at 638 kids. So when you look at the number of kids, the number of staff, and the expectations that we have to meet, it is time for us to be moving in the direction of looking for some assistance for our administration at that level. As a parallel to that discussion, I also asked Steve to run the numbers through Forecast 5. And that was a piece that showed that at schools that are of that size, actually ones that are smaller, have an assistant principal at the elementary level. So I think we had two really parallel pieces occurring here with regards to needs that we're observing and feeling, also some data that shows that there are some thresholds where some assistance is obviously needed. Kind of jumping around here, so let me just kind of go back and be a little bit more strategic here. Salary and benefits is a huge part of our budget every year. We have our CPI for July 1st, contract starting July 1st. CPI is 0.12%. We anticipate having those negotiations here early this fall. We've also figured out that if we kept at that level, we had $900 for points. That's a starting point for those discussions. For all other employee groups, we've included 1% for salary, and we have targeted right now November 14th of 2016, that's our regular board meeting in November, to be the time period where we come together to make decisions on salary for next year. So those will be, so we're holding off on all salary decisions until November. And at that time, we'll also have all of our markers in as far as what the budget will officially look like. Our hope is that we'll be able to augment those dollars and potentially be able to offer additional dollars for our staff. The staffing and budget requests, as we walked through, you will see that we had, Steve put in a 2.0 request, or not request, that was your initial projection for what you saw for our staffing needs. As we went through our process, we came very close to that with our district funds. Those were included with the inclusion of the Mandarin Chinese, that's the 0.13% at the middle school. That was an item that we had discussed last year, and for budgetary reasons we did not move it forward. We felt we had the latitude this year to be able to move that forward for the middle school. I believe we have 20 plus students who are registered for that. It also gives us an opportunity over the next few years to see how having a feeder program at the middle school impacts our high school numbers. Continuing on to the next items, Arboretum math interventionists. This is just, as we were looking at our needs with how we are intervening in the math area, we felt this was the appropriate level of staffing to keep Arboretum at a level consistent with equivalent type staffings at the other schools. It also will help us with not having to transport students. Any of our advanced math students at Arboretum, we have been for years, transporting them to another school. We're transporting them to the intermediate school. By having the math interventionist at the school located there, we can provide the instruction at their home school so that they don't have to leave, and it also saves us some dollar amounts. Heritage second grade, I think you've heard about this one before. We knew that we were going to be having some growth with our students. This is where it's precipitating out at the elementary level, is at second grade, and we placed that at Heritage. High school tech ed, a month or two ago, you approved the Innovation Center coordinator position, and I mentioned at that time that part of that would be associated with some anticipated tech ed growth. As we've looked at this item, I put in the district side of the budget with regards to if we hadn't started the Fab Lab, we'd still be here asking for 0.33% for our tech ed growth, and this is really coming in the construction trades area. The high school LMTC counseling and related staffing. This was a large discussion that I'm very pleased with, really the direction that it has transpired. You saw that we had this school year a resignation in the LMTC at the high school. One of the questions that Brian posed to his staff in the LMTC as we moved forward was, what are your needs moving forward, and how can we best service the needs in that space and in our larger school and district? And they came back with a report that really provided one LMTC director in addition to increasing our, I think it's listed on page 11 in your budget as a business teacher, but it's actually our technology integrator. It's Becky Castle's position at the high school, increasing her to full-time. So those were the pieces that covered the LMTC. Brian had also requested in our budget process a professional position in the counseling area or somewhere in that realm to really start to look at scheduling, testing coordination, data manager. As he and I talked through this, one of the things that we came up with was an idea to move it away from a professional staff person, or a certified staff person, I should say, from a $60,000 to $90,000 position, and look at one of our educational administrative assistants who has a great deal of skill in that area, and be able to elevate them from a lower level position to a higher level position and raise their pay in the efforts to be able to really serve as a coordinator for scheduling, testing coordination, and data. So Brian is in the process of working through that, through those shifts. We feel that will most likely be able to meet our needs, remove some of the responsibilities of the hands-on work specifically from the counselors so that they can focus in on other areas. And it's also freed up some additional dollars that we can allocate to other parts of the budget. So that's a long story around how that has come to be. The one piece that I do foresee, we're still in the assessment stage, is with really reallocating some duties within the department to one of the administrative assistants to cover those, to free up time for the counselors. There may be some additional time that we need to just cover some of the other administrative tasks. So we're going to try and see how that goes, and I may be coming back to you at some point to have that discussion. The other staffing changes that we have taking place across the district, you can see listed where we have a decrease in Spanish. I think that is a matter of just using our staff better across the district and being able to losing my words, Connie. I know that we had some staff from the high school that we've also used to fill some of the vacancies at Prairie. Is that correct?
We had a resignation.
We had a resignation.
We had a resignation at Prairie, and we were able to cover the staffing needs at Prairie with a 50% FTE as opposed to full-time. And we had 50% extra based on student enrollment at high school.
So the staff changes you see there are the Spanish 1.0 FTE. We had an increase in art of 0.64 and an increase of math of 1.0. We weren't anticipating not needing an additional math person at the high school, but our student numbers, even though our high school population isn't growing significantly, we have more kids taking math. So we've had a need for an additional 1.0 FTE at the high school as just part of our registration process. So when you take a look at the items that I've just gone through, those are items that I've identified as fitting under district funds, things that we're able to encompass within the district funds that we receive through our revenue cap dollars. The other items are then, I started to look at referendum funds per some of the work that Steve did. The custodial maintenance staffing, we're adding just 155,000 square feet at the new intermediate school, plus the space that we have at Prairie, plus some of the space that we still maintain at Heritage and the current intermediate site. So what you will see there are 6 FTEs. We have one of them at Heritage, 3 of them at the intermediate school, and then 2 district-level maintenance staff, which can be used across the district. So I think that, given our additional space, they've done a good job trying to see what our needs are to meet those. Also, technology staffing. Herb has worked with all of our principals in looking at how can we best utilize our technology staffing. There are some shifts that are occurring there, but in the end, we are looking for a 1.0 FTE to really serve as a district technician who can help us out across the district. And again, that is with more of our needs in tech as a growing district, but I also look at more of the things that you see Herb working on, cameras, door entry systems, more of the functions that are kind of melding between Joe Bellamo's maintenance world and Herb's world in IT. So I think that's something we have planned on and we're recommending at this time. Heritage Intermediate Math Interventionist, I already touched on. This is a function of those 2 schools no longer really being in conjunction with each other, each having their own half-time FTE. By doing this, we also avoid a cost of having to transport kids to the intermediate school in the $8,000. Prairie Elementary School principal, a 200-day contract. This is similar to what Marcy has with Mike Zabel at the middle school. I talked a little bit about what I see as our needs there with the size of the school. I really feel like this is an opportunity to really provide some assistance to Dean Kaminsky at his school. He's doing a great job, but he has a lot of kids, and with the pieces with ed effectiveness and all the other parts that go into really operating a school from an administrative level, I feel very strongly that this is a recommendation I need to be making. I've also titled in here, and I saw that I had an error at one point, is referendum reserve funds. We still have a balance of funds from the referendum operational funds that we have not allocated. That totals $329,991. As we talked about this with the budget committee, we are going to move that to the maintenance budget. And I think the only thing we need to be cognizant of is those are really dollars that can be used for mainly maintenance type things. So it could be heating, cooling, all of those type of things are utilities at the school. It's also in case we do, as we evaluate, did we hit the right staffing levels for custodial maintenance or other areas. It can be used in the future. We could allocate those for maintenance projects. I think it also gives us the flexibility that we could use them in other areas too. So if there are some other needs that come up that we identify as being referendum related, that $329,000 could be used in that fashion. But we felt that it was important, since we have projected numbers for utilities, that we needed to wait until we saw some of what the actuals were. And I feel we have a very comfortable number there that's going to allow us great flexibility. The last item I have on our memo here is really just with regards to the district contingency fund. It does remain at $100,000, but we did allocate, as part of our startup funds for the Innovation Center, to allocate, I've taken part of those funds out of the contingency. So that's a 0.66% FTE. Otherwise, it's $40,000, $200,000, which leaves us with a district contingency of just under $60,000. The items that were not funded in this budget, not necessarily ones that they're just items I think that we feel are a need, but they're not the highest needs that for us right now, are the K-4 technology integrator, math coach K-12, science coach K-12, 7-12 literacy coach, The Prairie Counselor, we feel we can address some of those needs through the assistant principal position. We'll evaluate paraeducators per our enrollments and allocation of those staff here probably for the next budget cycle or the next iteration of the budget. And if we need any additions there, we will have that discussion at that point. And then I'm not moving forward the district communication coordinator as well. So as I told you in January when we met, there were a number of things we could accomplish, and there were some things that we weren't going to be able to. So through our work and conversations with our staff, we felt that this best represented our directions moving forward and hitting needs in many areas across the district. And with that, we'll open it up for any questions.
Are there any comments first from those who would have been on the budget committee discussions? So this was approved at the budget committee, right? To
Yes,
bring
it
forward
was.
to the full board. I don't know if there were any other, maybe before we open it up to everyone else, if there were other comments you had based on your discussions.
I think Brandy did a pretty good job summarizing. We definitely had discussion on many of the items. The wellness tab was a big discussion. I think it helped me to hear that it really came from the staff in the allocation and the solution. And I think we need to play it out and see if there really is adequate coverage there. And I know that we will, be monitoring that situation.
And just to that point, John, that's how they're operating right now.
Yeah.
So we've increased Becky's time for the remainder of this year to really fill some of those voids. They are operating in many respects that way right now.
And I know that they had talked about moving some of the community, the network that she was doing to a different place. And, there's a lot that goes on in the WCTEC. So, I'm sensitive to being sure that everybody, that position is, not too cumbersome for one person. I don't know, Jack, any comments that you want to?
No, I think, that was, we did spend some time on that particular discussion, and I thought, the staff and administration handled that very well, working together, coming up with a solution that's more in line with what they need. But the other stuff was pretty much in line. Seemed like there was needs for all of us.
Okay, are there questions on this first draft of the budget proposal, which we will be acting on, or will be approving by other board members?
Julie had her hand up
Julie?
before.
Yeah, I guess just one in general that's kind of more theoretical. We've done a lot of work with developing a strategic plan and vision and mission for the district. And certainly how we allocate our resources needs to be tied in reflective of that process. And I guess I'm hoping, I again, repeating my frustration with goals committees, our inability to maybe interact, that all of those pieces come together.
Mm-hmm.
So that, our goals as a board, our goals as a district, Randy's goals, the individual building goals, there's a fuller discussion. It feels like the first draft of the budget is when it comes out, and it feels like a lot of those decisions are made between Randy and Steve. And again, it's not, I'm hoping we can make some progress on integrating that whole discussion so that it is more cohesive and interactive.
And I think our process has been, we had received the budget requests prior to the January meeting we had here. So we didn't go through those as we did 2 years ago. We spent more time on trying to get some of the big picture pieces.
Mm-hmm.
When we received those requests in, those were all presented at our administrative cabinet to the whole group to kind of flush out any questions. And then Steve and I met with each of the budget managers separately. And really what we were looking for there were opportunities to see, okay, is this something you're asking for this year? is it something you're asking for, knowing that we can't fund it, but you want it on the list for the future? So you had some of those. So some of the items that you saw on the last page fell into that area. The areas that came out as highest priority, if we didn't do the math interventionist piece, the comments from Tim and the principals were we will be moving backwards in math intervention. So that was a high piece for us. In listening to staff and just from observations and talking to, I think, an administrative team as a whole as well, the elementary principal, assistant principal was a high priority. And then obviously we had pieces that we needed to look at with regards to referendum pieces, which were a function of making sure we had the right numbers in there. But when you take a look at things like the Mandarin Chinese piece, we've had some discussions on. I think it's one we've got to evaluate the program at some point to see, is this meeting where we want to be going, which I think is a discussion we've had around the table here. But I think in order to give it a clear view, you've got to see how can you, if you've got 20-some kids wanting to take it at the middle school, how does that impact when they get to the high school? Because right now, the kids that are taking it are taking a bit of a leap of faith in their 9th grade year. And so our numbers aren't really growing, they're not really going backwards, but they're at a status quo number. Does that grow with this, or does that not have the impact? But I do think, Julie, that from our perspective, and I understand what you're trying to get at is more of the dialogue to understand where they all fit together. But I think when we looked at things strategically, and when I sat down and to put this out, I mean, the strategic planning framework was next to me, looking at where do we fit? And what are some of the priorities that are coming from our team that are specifically related to some of the work that we're trying to put together?
And again, I don't mean it as a criticism. I do think we've made great progress in the whole process, and it also really helps to hear you describe and explain the work that's gone on with your administrative cabinet. So how all of these pieces have been more collaborative and brought up through the system as well. It feels like the board kind of gets somewhat brought in at the tail end a bit, but.
John?
So I exactly know how you feel, Julie. It really helped me this year being on the budget committee.
It does.
Would it be appropriate, because there are such huge decisions made in that first draft, to have a special meeting even before it goes to the budget committee to hear some of the background about the decisions and kind of what's on the near horizon, so that, I mean, the first time I looked at it, when I opened the budget committee, it was like,
Yep.
this is a lot. And and I read it, and then we have the meeting, and you digest it, and you think, oh yeah, that's all making some sense. And, it isn't, I just think because it's so huge and such big decisions, maybe that's a possibility to have a meeting even before it goes to the budget and before that first draft of the budget, to have this whole board aware of all of the things you're considering and how it falls out. I mean, it so helped being on budget, but I know last year when that first budget came, I go, you kind of get the shakes because it's a lot.
It is.
Well, and it's really interesting, is particularly because I think maybe it was even just last month that we officially took action on this framework.
Yeah.
So we're there's certain things that have been happening that, now that if this is now in place, the ability to have the pieces feel like they're fit together a little bit, because when like for instance, a question about the assistant principal.
Right.
It was interesting when we had the linkage, not the linkage, maybe, the meeting, with staff and everything. That was one of, if you went to which I didn't go, but I had questions on some of the handouts on the budget and finance, that you had your forecast 5. That one of the examples of what you're thinking about was that particular topic. And so that helped me when first of all, I took this out and said, okay, yeah, it kind of all does fit in.
Yeah.
And then but it also then, what helped was the meeting in January, then the handout that you had in your, in that roundtable discussion that budget had. But all of that was like in preparation of this. So this year I'm thinking, because things didn't happen as cleanly as you'd like them to, you know, now that this is in place.
We're moving the right direction. We're
Yes,
just,
yes, I know, I share the frustration, but I was able to see where all the pieces were coming from different places, not just one nice tiny little. Yeah, Mark?
Well, in support of what Joan suggested, if we're in combination with Julie's concern, if we're going to have that as an actual mechanism versus a document,
mhm.
it's gonna take more meeting time on our part so we can articulate some of those things. And it would seem that there probably are one or two fairly significant pieces, the budget being one, where that initial discussion, not the whittling down of it, but at least for the awareness level of the entire board, it would make sense to have one or two special meetings for those kind of entities.
And I would throw out there for the board to consider, I think part of these discussions that we talk about, particularly when you look at this, I would like us to see, are there ways that we can structure some of our time at our regular meetings to make
Yes,
sure that we
that's
start to
As well.
address those.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
think that we should be able to accomplish what you're talking about. The other part that drives a lot of this piece is registration.
Yeah.
Because and that's the part I think that Steve and I we're not, there's a certain process we have to go through with middle school registration, high school registration, because there were some things that were surprises to us that came out of that. I didn't see the tech ed increases coming, but that's definitely an area we're happy about because it was a part of the program we wanted to grow, and that's starting to rebuild itself. The math position, that was one that I think was not on our radar, but it was certainly, it came out with regards to the signups that our students had. So what we initially thought we would have for staffing levels didn't really come through. So that's one of the pieces that we've got to be looking at, how all the pieces, and then really being able to put the puzzle together happened just in the last few weeks. We had in our minds what our priorities were, what we'd like to accomplish, and then being able to actually fit them together to see what we could do in order to put together really the narrative of it. And I think the challenge that we had this time was trying to really put a narrative to it, because we felt you needed to really see where the flow of the dollars came from in order to fully understand why certain things were moving and other things maybe weren't. But I think the other piece that we've asked as a administrative team is, I want things on the list, even if it's things that you're not necessarily saying we're gonna fund this year. So I mean, I will keep keeping a district communications coordinator on there, for example. I will not prioritize that over a math interventionist, but at some point, I hope we do move to the point where we can address that. And so hopefully over time, we can start to address some of the bullet points at the end, because what you'll see is some of the items that were on last year's end of the document have now been able to move forward.
I'd like to ask just two questions. One, when I was looking at the custodial staff, you were adding positions. Two of them you were putting into the here as general maintenance people. Are those in a specific field, or is it just maintenance? I mean, I know we have one electrician, we have one carpenter and stuff like that. Were these two positions something specific, or were they just generic?
I think Steve.
Do we know?
Yeah, they were not specific. We have the district electrician, we have a district plumber, so these were designed to be more general maintenance positions. The square footage to use to calculate the two was both the grounds, because obviously now we have a cross field to take care of and other outdoor facilities as well as the indoors. So the 2 FTE is really what it would take for the total additional square footage, but it was not specifically earmarked for like either a plumber or electrical position at this time.
The other thing is about this tech ed instructor again.
Yep.
Okay, so let me understand what we approved before. We approved how much out of the contingency fund at a previous meeting? I gotta admit, I can't remember the exact dollar amount.
What we approved, Dave, was at that point, it was before we had all of our numbers together.
Okay.
I also felt like there was a a window of time we needed to move forward. So my recommendation was to park 1.0 FTE into the contingency.
So now we're pulling a third of that out and putting it onto the general fund
Right,
and leaving 2/3 of it on.
Correct. And at the time when we approved that, one of the pieces I shared with you was that our early projections were showing we may have some additional tech ed needs. And that's really what's transpired in this draft of the budget. And then what I see for that 66%, the $40,000 that remains within contingency, I view that as really startup funds for that program, of which in the next iteration of the budget or the next year's budget will absorb that into our district funds.
Okay, that was my second question, was what's the plan to get it out of the contingency fund? I mean,
It'll be
I totally believe we should never use contingency fund to fund a permanent
Staff,
position.
yeah.
It's the exact opposite of what the fund was created for.
And it was just parked there, though, right, Randy?
It's temporarily parked there. I read it as, I think when you start to look at really the dollars that we have available as emergency funds, contingency funds, fund balance, all of those type of things, if we have a boiler go out, we're most likely going to be, we could be using contingency, but we're most likely going to be using fund balance. We have those funds addressed there in order, and they're at a sufficient level for us to really address those larger needs. When you look at what we've used contingency over the last few years, it's been really staffing needs that have come up usually over the summer or early in the fall. And the reason I utilized it earlier in this process was, one, I think this is an innovative program that I think will be successful, but I needed something I wanted to start the program up, use it as startup funds without impacting the other parts of the budget. Because I think I can't do that over math interventionists, but I think it's an important piece that's going to impact a lot of kids, and I think the opportunity was in a good place where we were going to have some success with it. And that's what I see moving forward there. So I do see, Dave, it coming out of contingency. It won't, a year from now, you're not going to see Innovation Center as part of contingency, and then contingency the smaller number. It'll be back to the $100,000, and we'll have adjusted our budget accordingly.
Mark?
Maybe perhaps part of the problem, I struggled with this after I saw the letter to the editor a couple of weeks ago about, is a contingency fund an emergency fund? Or is a contingency fund meant to provide resources that are not budgeted? And that's not necessarily emergency.
Right.
And so as long as we're on board as to the purpose of the contingency fund, and I was very supportive of how we handled it, because I didn't see contingency as being synonymous with emergency. As long as the public's aware of our understanding of what that fund means, then I think we're in good shape. And you don't have a total understanding of where you're going to need the resources as you're going forward, and to have a pool to allow for potential growth as this particular venture, it makes sense to use a fund for that purpose.
And I think it was important to get the right person on board.
Right.
And this was the right person. It created a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement within the community, and it's been great for our student body. We had a project that our special ed kids actually use the laser engraver, which when you have your special ed kids and they talk to the special ed kids and ask, where do you want to work after you leave Waunakee High School, most of them are saying a cafe or a coffee shop, because that's their experience. You know, now we're giving these kids different experiences so that they can look at alternatives. We had 8 students make a 3D printer. They ordered a kit, and you know, they're huddling around trying to figure out how to program this thing. You know, we've got teachers that are excited about it. So, you know, I agree with you. I think contingency funds are unforeseen, where we can make improvements to kids' lives, and that's what I hear about around this table.
I have one other comment that's not related to the Fab Lab thing, but the other point about the 5% increase in the health and benefits costs. So I'm assuming if that's increase in our budget, we are absorbing those increased costs. So that's not being passed along to staff. So again, I mean, I understand that we're doing it. Staff, I hope, understands and appreciates how the district itself is absorbing their cost. So sometimes, though we're not reflecting it in a pay raise, this is another way we're providing for our staff as well.
That
So-
very question came up as when Connie and I did conversations with our different staff groups on handbook language changes. And to get their input on it. That was one that came up at least one or two of our sessions. Today, Steve and I just scheduled out over the next few weeks for us to go and present the first draft of the budget to our staff and to each of the buildings. So those are some things that we can highlight as we have that dialogue.
Are there any other comments on the first draft of the budget?
Can I just clarify one
Yep.
thing so everybody's aware, and I think it was a question somebody asked. What we're looking to do with the first draft of the budget, in any of those staff positions, particularly many of those we would like to get moving on getting those posted and moving them forward. So we view the first draft of the budget and the approval of that draft to really release us to start doing some of the work to fill those positions. The second draft of the budget and third draft are really just finalizing any of the pieces that, as Steve's learning more of the variables that go into the budget to really fine tune those aspects of it.
Okay, so the question before the board, actually, it was approved 3-0 at the budget committee. So we are looking for a motion from the full board to approve the first draft of the budget as presented.
Motion to approve the first draft of the budget.
Motion by John. Is there a
Second.
Second by Mark.
That's fine.
Oh, I thought I heard. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Great, thank you very much, y'all.
Student fees.
The next item on the agenda from the Budget Committee meeting for board consideration tonight is the student fees for the 2016-17 school year. How I handle this is this information is shared out with all the school buildings for an opportunity to provide input back as far as any changes they would like to see for the next school year. The board has previously acted on the food service program fees. I did get a request back from the high school to take a look at the family and consumer ed fees from $15 to $20, which is just a result of increased cost to operate those classes. And then there was a change requested at the Budget Committee board meeting to change the adult lunch price in line with changes to the other prices for the food service program. To go from $3.50 to $3.75. With that amendment, the Budget Committee recommended approval of the fee structure to the full board this evening on a 3-0 vote.
Is there a motion to approve of the fees, and then we can have discussion if any?
I so moved.
Second. Okay, Mark, and then Jack this time. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Transportation planning.
I think Steve and I can split this one. Why don't I start and talk about school start times, and I'll let you talk about some of the busing aspects. Rebecca, do you have what was connected, what was linked in there? Do we want to looking at the start time one. There you go. Right, in your packet, you will see a document that outlines many different alternatives for really our bell times and for for the purposes of looking at this, I think there's a little bit of dialogue that needs to take place first. First of all, there's our context. As we've looked at our calendar the last few years, we've had some flexibility with the changes in the state law with counting instructional hours. We don't have to count instructional days any longer, we have to count instructional hours. As we've looked at that over time, there's specific markers for different grade bands of students, how many hours that you have to have. Our elementary has a comfortable number of hours that they have. The intermediate school is at a comfortable level from my perspective where they're at. Middle school and high school, it just gets a little tighter. And when you take a look at start and end times to school, they're driven obviously ideally by everything instructionally, but they're also driven by things like transportation. So where we started with was the concept of saying if we change nothing, we look at our current bell times up here, with our new intermediate school being located in a new location, how does that impact us to be able to get kids really to school is the biggest challenge. And what our issue is the intermediate school being out now on Woodland Drive is causing a challenge for us to be able to get the kids dropped off at the elementaries. And our buses drop off at the elementaries at about 7:15 in the morning, 7:20 in the morning. And then they go back out and they do what we call a double bus run. And they go back on their same route and pick up our kids in the secondary school. And then they drop those students off at the intermediate, middle school, and high school. We've been able to keep, because of our proximity of these schools, really their start time the same. And we've been able to accomplish that from the 7:15, 7:20 in the morning till about 8:10 is when we would be our late drop-off time at those other schools. What's occurring though with the intermediate school moving out to Woodland is we're finding that we need more time in order between this duration of dropping off the elementary students and getting to the other schools. So that was the first thing. So status quo, this will not work just with the logistics of timing for busing in order to make those times work. So we looked at some other alternatives. This is one that keeps all of our instructional minutes the same, but does some shifts as far as just adding some time at the beginning and the end of school. And what our bus company shared was it's definitely something that you could do, but they had high levels of concern that was going to be possible. And the pieces that they felt were going to be challenging were, again, having these three schools have the same start and the same end time. And how can we make that work? So we looked then at two other alternatives. If you can scroll, keep going, thank you. We looked at alternative 2 and alternative 3. Initially, I proposed one that was 8 minutes. And really at 8 minutes at the middle school and high school, looking at that, they ran an 8-period day. They had 4 blocks per day. You could evenly distribute those. And Lamers felt much more comfortable as we started to look at options for how we could stagger our start times in the morning for the drop-offs, and then in the afternoon we can still end at the same time because they would split the buses 3 directions and they would rotate through to pick up the students. The alternative that Lamers preferred, and the ones that our middle school and high school administration preferred, was alternative 2, which was based off of 10 minutes. The 10 minutes of adding 10 minutes to what I call as our instructional day, so that's really within the instructional timeframes of our school day, gives us the most flexibility for busing, and it also builds in some additional time for Marcy and Brian to really adjust what happens between the start and end of school. When I'm recommending these, I'm not looking to change the contract time of our teaching staff. They have an 8-hour contiguous day. That I'm not looking to add 10 minutes to their contract. I'm really just looking to shift what's happening within that time period with regards to this. What I would ask for your consideration tonight is to I'm asking for you to endorse really a direction to be moving in this direction with our start times, but I'd like some additional flexibility that as we're working through some of the logistics of it, that I have some flexibility to make sure that everything is in a position where it can be as effective and as efficient as we can. But the bottom line is we can't keep our start and end times the same. I need to find, as they are this year, I need to find a way that we can stagger our times in the morning. What that means is that we will be dropping off at the middle school and high school first, and then those LDL, the intermediate will come after that, and we will then end at the same time. It does not change our instructional minutes or instructional hours at the intermediate school. Elementary stays the same, and I don't feel going earlier than 7:40 is an option. And then our middle school, high school start at the 8:15 and end at 3:35. So those are just the logistics of what we're trying to work at from a busing standpoint. The instructional aspects that I know from Marcy and Brian's perspective is as they've looked at implementing their win time and implementing contact time, there's been some desire to have some greater flexibility also with these 10 minutes to help adjust things within their schedules. So I think that has a positive impact as well. And Brian, you shared that with your leadership team last week and had some of those dialogues, and just trying to give some greater flexibility as far as how we can utilize the time during the day. But that's what our recommendation here is, and I would be interested to hear any questions or comments that you have. Mark?
Well, on the 10-minute part, I was wondering about how that would help with those win times, if help facilitate that a little bit better. I'm not sure if it's with this segment or Steve's segment, but the question I had, we did have a group of parents concerned about the transferring of the elementary kids. Is that issue going to be resolved through some of this planning, or?
No, this doesn't impact any of that issue. That's more of a mapping issue and a shuttle system. So those type of shuttles would still take place here, like at the elementary. But so that doesn't change any aspect of that. All this is adjusting really two things. It's the logistics of continuing to stay with our double bus runs at elementary and secondary, and having the time between those two runs to make sure that we can actually get kids where they need to be. The second piece is, as part of adjusting that, it addresses what we also consider a need is some additional minutes that would give us some greater flexibility. To be honest, you heard David Carley talk about it, and Brian's talked about it tonight a little bit too. When you start looking at our testing, where we have some of the late starts, etc., it also gives me some flexibility so that I'm not so tight with snow day makeups at the high school. So it really helps to address, I think, a lot of different things. I'm also trying to be cognizant of trying not to have the dismissal too late. I was pleased to see that it came out at 3:35 because I was concerned it was going to be later than that. Joe?
Can I just ask Brian a question? Do you feel, you said that you have run it by the leadership, do you feel there will be any morale concern with adding 10 minutes of instructional time?
Well, I don't think so, and here's why I'm saying that. The leadership team, and I did talk about a little bit with students in homeroom today too, because we did have a homeroom today with getting ready for, we have 2 contact days because of the late starts with Aspire. But the biggest feedback that we've gotten from the contact time right now is the part that makes people feel uncomfortable is the 5 minutes going into the contact time and the 5 minutes coming out, because it starts to feel like what we call a skinny day again, because we're used to the 10 minutes of passing time. So the 2 options that I shared with the leadership team were, one, that we could go 10 minutes of passing time coming into the contact time, extend the contact time to 35 minutes, and then go 5 minutes on the way out of it. The other one was doing 10 and 10, similar to what we're doing right now. Feedback from the leadership team was that they felt, let's just do 10 and 10. It makes it feel like what we were used to for years. If they need to or want to extend students for a little bit there and make that 35 minutes, they can do that and then just, write a student pass. So we'll have the full faculty meeting on Wednesday. That's one of the things that we'll talk about there. And the other thing that I'll do is next Monday I have parent advisory. So I'll take it to parent advisory, and then I was hoping to have a principals council meeting this week, but with all of our testing, that's not going to work. So I'll probably try to get that scheduled for early next week in one of the contact times, just because what I don't want to do is not have had those conversations, have people all of a sudden in the middle of summer go, what's going on? But I think right now, I'll be able to have that conversation with leadership, with the full faculty, with parents and parent advisory, and with the students. And once you have a conversation with, the 14, 15 students that had homeroom today, due to the miracles of modern technology, that conversation will be had by many more students, and that's okay. That's what I want. And I'll probably try and get hold of, I don't know if they'll still have another issue of the Purple Sage this year, but I'll try and get hold of Caitlin Samuelson or one of the students and let them know that this would be something that would be informative.
How many minutes are there currently in each block?
85 now consistently. We went to that consistently to find the time for the contact time. We used to have 90, 95, 90, 95.
So part of what I'm asking for tonight is, if you're amenable to it, to give me some flexibility, because I think that as we start to implement some of the changes, I don't want to just
Thank you, Brian.
lock it in too tightly. I'd like to have some flexibility if there's some things that I haven't foreseen in our initial review of this.
I think out of the budget committee, we approved the alternative too.
Right. That's correct. That was what I was.
I think we just approved it for discussion. I think there was no motion.
I think what I had you do was just move it forward for discussion, the whole piece.
Yeah.
So what I am leaning towards alternative 2. I think that's the one that seems to give us the greatest latitudes. It also, I think, addresses some of the concerns I've heard that Brian and Marcy have talked about. But I'd like some continued latitude administratively to be able to address it if there's some things that we didn't catch in the first iteration.
I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So the later bus, on the later buses, there could be an intermediate student, a middle school student, and a high school student?
There is now.
There is now.
Yeah. So that won't change. That will be the same. It's just they'll drop off at the high school or middle school first and then go to the intermediate. That's the plan. Okay. Have we shift or notified or made any changes with the opening up of the roadway onto Woodland from the Kilkenny? Those students are now a lot closer than they used to be on that one end of Southbridge. Are we?
That's actually our next, when I said that, Steve and I were going to split this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's his
All right,
part,
sorry.
yeah. That's, we're going to get to that one in just a minute.
Okay, great.
So, yeah.
I guess the only other thing, I'm sure you've given some thought to the traffic crossing Woodland at that time is,
The other piece that goes with this, Mark, is when school opens in the fall, Woodland Drive will not, or County Q, and that intersection will not be complete. So that's gonna be a bit of a, and we're gonna have to get that information out to our parents and community as well. That beginning of school year, that intersection will be in construction.
Under construction, yeah.
And so Lamers has been working with the village officials to see
best path.
how do we make sure because we need to have passability there with the school down the road. So,
Do you want to close my windows?
Dave, you have a question?
It's my understanding the bus contract is up next year, right?
Yes.
We just did a 1-year extension this year.
That's good.
I just hope as we go into this, I know several of us expressed concerns with the bus company, especially about them showing up late on a daily basis. And so I know we expressed then that we're going to want to see the data next year when we start going into that. So I hope that's going to be a big tracking item next year. Because I'll tell you, I'm going to feel really uncomfortable if we get to doing the bus contract and we're told again, well, we're not really sure how many times they've been late, how many times they've been on time. And, we're going to need that data this year, and I hope we really force them to give it to us, or that whatever our schools are, whatever, keep track of it. Because if there's one complaint I've heard consistently is why does my kid keep telling me they're late for their first class?
And I think there's a couple of pieces to it. When Steve and I met with Lamers with regards to this whole topic that we're talking about, it was very clear to them that we were going to be requesting for that data that you just talked about.
Okay.
We can request that on any given bus right now, and they have the GPS abilities to do that. And they've actually started to create these zones where the GPS, where the bus will stop and they can document those times. The other piece that I think we have to be very clear when we work through the bus contract, and that's a conversation we can have here as well, is some of the concerns that parents have brought to us are really decisions we've made. It's because the drop-off is at, if we have an 8:15 start, it's a drop-off at 8:10. And I think that there's some desire to have that earlier, but with the way we run our routes, that's something that we've set and given to Lamers, so it hasn't always fallen on their end. There have been options where they've been late. Certainly that's been the case. But equally amount, it's been things where they've been on time per the regulations we've given them.
I think, though, one of the things that Randy brought up with the Woodland and Q, we probably will expect some late buses next year.
Yeah.
You know, it's just impractical, so I think we have to look at that, at least while that intersection is being constructed.
That said, we said we're gonna be proactive. There's no reason we can't talk to the village and the police department to make that work better too.
Yeah, this especially with times.
I'll tell you, having done a lot of road construction myself and built a lot of streetlights, one of the usual big requirements is that around the school time, all the construction equipment gets off the road and waits. And there is no reason the village can't require that. There's no reason the village can't require that the traffic cones and all that stuff gets pulled back for a half-hour time period. And the construction people just have to work around it. Because that's way too many buses coming through one spot. I know I wouldn't want to be the construction guy standing there 3 feet away from all those buses coming by. But
It really is gonna, I haven't thought about it too much, it's gonna change the whole traffic pattern
Yes,
with that school being over
Mhm.
there. That light, the side light was always shorter before, now it's gonna have to be longer. It's gonna have to change.
So are you looking for action on this?
Pardon?
You can do Steve's.
Okay.
If Steve, you want to jump into the next part, and Rebecca, you can open up the map, would be great.
Okay, so the next item I wanted just to touch on, just to make the board members aware of really the discussion that's going on, first at the intermediate school, and then secondly on the topic you brought up, Julie. So what you see is the new intermediate school transportation zone. The orange is the area that right now is eligible for busing to cross Highway Q to get to the current intermediate school. The orange will now be the walk zone. So whenever we make changes to our transportation policies, we will be notifying parents. But I would expect as board members that you probably will hear from parents in the orange who previously were eligible to ride a bus, and starting next year will be considered walkers to the new intermediate school. The red area is the opposite. So currently the red area walks to the intermediate school. The red area will now be completely eligible for transportation. The reason why the red will be eligible is 5th and 6th grade students crossing Highway Q has been determined by the sheriff to be hazardous. So all students in the red that are going to cross to the west will now be eligible to ride the bus. So basically those zones flip-flop. So we will be notifying parents, but as board members, I think it's just something you need to be aware of, because it is a pretty big change in how students at the intermediate school age are transported to and from school. So just wanted to be made aware of that one. The next one, the high school, is one that's probably, definitely will be brought to your attention as board members. Whenever an area has service and then the service is removed, we can expect to see concerns raised or complaints lodged. And what's going on is there is now a road that is cut in from the Kilkenny Farms area to Woodland. And with that road being cut in, there's now paths for high school students to get to school within the 1.75 miles that's in Board of Education policy. For students in grades 9 through 12, the sheriff has not determined any hazardous areas. The sheriff determined that students in that age category are old enough to sufficiently figure out a way to walk, bike, or ride that distance to school. So currently, in order to get the students from Kilkenny Farms and part of Southbridge out, they need to go out of the subdivision along Peaceful Valley Parkway or Kearney Drive, and by the time they get to the high school, they're past the 1.75 miles. With the road being cut in, all of the area in pink is now going to be within walking distance to the high school. So I wanted you all to be aware of that. I do expect that there will be concerns and complaints lodged with the board. Be aware there's a parallel situation to that, which is in 6 Mile Creek. For members on the Board of Education Policy Committee, in the past, you'll remember that was a common concern or complaint we heard from parents, was in an area when 8th graders could get bused. They turned into 9th graders, no longer were eligible because of the sheriff's determination. The area in the pink is going to be exactly the same. 8th graders will be bused. 7th graders will be bused. Intermediate school students will be bused. High schoolers will not be eligible. So it creates a very unique circumstance where you have a home with an 8th grader, again, because of the sheriff's determination that 7th and 8th graders, it is hazardous, Woodland Drive is hazardous for 7th and 8th graders. You can get bused. The next year you go into 9th grade, busing is removed. That's very hard for a lot of parents to understand. We've really done a good job notifying the 6 Mile Creek families of that. We send them a letter every year when they've got an 8th grade student, notify them. That same letter will be going out within the next couple of weeks to all of the high schoolers in the pink area, plus the 8th graders currently, to make them aware of the situation. It's only being brought to your attention right now just because it probably will become a board issue. And the only way not to have that occur would be to change the transportation policy. And if that was changed, it would need to be changed, not just for this area, but other areas as well.
It looks like the pink area for the high school, that's all the brand new homes.
Yep.
So it's not people that have gotten used to it. That should help.
Well, how many families are in it right now?
I think, yeah, we've got her up there.
18 students.
Okay. Yeah.
The Westbridge area out there, because that's outside of the purple line, I assume that's just busted through that one.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a crazy question. Middleton has gotten around some of this with messing around with the concept of pedestrian bridges. I gotta admit, looking way down the road, and as we watch Kilkenny Farms go, would it be cheaper to start talking to the village about creating a pedestrian bridge there rather than us paying for buses into the distant future? And I don't know, I gotta admit, I don't know what the cost of something like that would be, but when you sit there and consider that road, Woodland, getting bigger and bigger, and that area expanding, and the fact everybody wants to get to the high school and the middle school, in the long run, would we be better off trying to get some sort of deal going down that road or over that road?
Or under that road.
Or under that road. Middleton did the underneath method due to an elementary school, and it's worked great, I think. So.
Gary?
Well, the only thing when you're talking about Woodland to start with, that's a terrible road to stop, and even where that road comes out, any sort of backup, you're gonna end up putting a guard there.
any kind of backup up the hill already, and I know over the hill, that's gonna be terrible going for people crossing, high schoolers and that.
They're almost gonna.
You stop
put a
traffic at
stop
all.
I find it hard to believe, and my ex lives on Woodland Road, so my daughter deals with it all the time. I find it hard to believe we're not gonna have an accident there in the near future, just because of sending that many across.
Is there any thought to be using a blinking flasher like they have at the railroad intersection down Main Street? I mean, that's another high volume.
Or there's one by the entrance to Southbridge. Those blinking flashers are
Yeah,
good.
There's one by West Bridge or, yeah, that's.
Excellent.
Important.
That would be good.
I really think we gotta find some alternative. Over time, this is gonna get more expensive for us than helpful.
Well, it's interesting
Good
because, I
point.
mean, I think there's actually probably a survey that's out there right now, and it's open until sometime that the Waunakee Westport Comprehensive Plan, they're on the rec survey right now. And so maybe things like paths,
Again, and that
providing
area,
input
yeah.
on some of that possibility.
Aren't they redoing the queue?
Well, that's,
Yeah.
that's the.
Not at that point.
No,
Is
not
it
that far
all the way
in.
up?
They're doing a queue from here. This whole piece, I think, is being redone. To queue all the way across Woodland down towards Emmons Manufacturing.
Even there would be interesting to put
Like
a town.
Or above or something.
Oh, putting it
But it's
across
so
Q
far
going
up
east
there.
and west? Yeah, going east and west would be
It-
interesting, although I'd pull it further north than I think the TIF allows them.
Yeah, I don't know how far that goes up.
I'm not really positive either. I guess if you got it down near Andrews, it might be useful, but I think Woodland's gonna be our bigger problem over time. Especially with the younger grades, and if it would kill a bus route, how much money do you save there? And then not having a crossing guard there all the time, how much money would that save?
I don't understand killing a bus route.
Because right now, we're having to send a bus across for the middle school. We wouldn't have to do that if there was a over or underpass. You
But
wouldn't
isn't
have to
that
bus
more
those
for-
students anymore.
Isn't that more for the intermediate school?
It's
Where you
everything
could
but high school,
potentially,
right?
No, you're busing the middle school kids across Woodland.
Because
Everything
Woodland's
high
considered a,
right.
is,
Yes.
Woodland has been identified as a hazardous road for 8th grade and below.
yeah.
And it's gonna get worse as it goes on, and we're gonna be putting more buses going how many blocks?
But if you put the underpass or overpass on Q as well, you know, that whole area, you know, now you're talking about savings.
I don't think these are,
Yeah, they're not.
as I recalled, any one of them going up someplace else, some of them are $1 million items.
Oh, yeah.
It's not it's a lot of bus rides to make up $1 million,
Yeah.
depending on where you're running.
From our perspective, we wanted to really bring the shift in the bus routes to, so the one for the intermediate that you saw on the previous slide, and then I think the one that probably has the larger impact is this one, particularly, and that's driven by that little road right here. And we'll be communicating that out. We do not have any recommendations at this point to change the policy. So as Steve alluded to, there could be some concerns that come this direction as a result of us communicating some of those changes.
Kids are already using it. It is fun when you walk it, see kids are already using it. They're walking and biking.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you need formal board action on these items under transportation planning? I noticed there wasn't really a vote at the
What I would
committee level,
like
or
is
it just?
I would just like an endorsement of the school start and end times with the flexibility for administration to adjust as needed.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Is a motion with a second? Oh, yep, and Jack got it, yes.
Yep. Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, committee reports. I don't think we're action items on our curriculum, but the minutes were in the packet.
Facilities has some.
On to facility. Unless there's questions on the curriculum committee minutes, by anybody. Thank you, Tim. Okay, on to facilities.
So we had our meeting, and there were a couple items that have to come to the full board. First was we took a look at the capital maintenance plan and some 2016 summer projects recommendations. The biggest two were about approving the high school gym resurfacing and then lighting within the auxiliary gym. And so the recommendation was to go forward with those and to get more details regarding the pool boiler, which I think we heard about last year and the year before that and a while back. So the recommendation by the committee on a 3-0 vote was to go ahead with the gym floor resurfacing and the auxiliary gym lighting.
And those are the 2016 summer projects.
And those are both in the auxiliary gym.
Yes. So the committee's bringing forward that on a 3-0
Yep,
vote.
so that's the first item.
We can take action. Is there a motion to approve with that recommendation?
I move we approve the recommendation by the facilities committee.
Motion by Mark, seconded by John. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Security camera door entry systems.
So the second item we took a long look at was about, and this was mainly under referendum dollars, was how to decide how to spend some of the money that's been saved in getting them into some of the summer projects and stuff that's going to be done anyway. And the big focus became the door control system and the security cameras. Was about getting those up and operational in all the schools, probably sooner than later. There's probably going to be more referendum money to be able to be used since we've had some good savings on the intermediate school and on Prairie and Heritage. But these two could be done first so that they'd be up and running, by the end of summer, I believe?
Right.
And that would affect every school. So the recommendation was to go ahead with what you'll see was a very long write-up on the access control system, which is just kind of software upgrading the current system and then putting a newer system in the intermediate school with the concept of over time, probably all the schools will slowly be transitioned to that newer system, but not jumping them all to one, which does mean, unfortunately, there's going to be 2 card access systems in the district for a while.
Yeah, we just felt it was too cost prohibitive to go to the RS2 system all at one time in all schools. So we felt that the upgrade was important, and we'd rather shift our dollars at this point towards the security camera system, which was the next item I think Dave was going to talk about.
So the recommendation by the committee was to approve upgrading the current card access system, putting in the new RS2 one at the intermediate school, and then completing all the security cameras throughout the district.
And those were all passed on a single 3-0 vote at the committee.
We had probably,
Is that referendum dollars that are being used
those are
in
rough.
all the schools?
For the cameras?
No, where is
For
it?
Heritage and Prairie they are, but for the other schools, those are non-referendum funds.
Maintenance vote.
So we've utilized the referendum funds where we could to best leverage those, and then we've augmented those to make sure we have the security cameras in all of our schools. Right now, for example, our elementaries mainly have 1 camera at the main door. And we have, obviously, with the referendum, our goal has been to increase those across more coverage, square footage-wise. So our proposal is to address the camera system, because we feel that is gives us the best coverage from a safety standpoint in all of our schools, and we have consistent coverage everywhere. So that's internally and external cameras to really address that by the end of summer in all of our schools.
And I think in our notes it indicates which funds, the money, well, which buckets the funds would be coming from in terms of which buildings, and one's coming from district dollars, others from operational funds. Exactly. So are there Is there a motion to approve of the recommendation that came out of the facility committee, and then we can have additional questions after that?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, seconded.
Second.
Oops, I saw Gary's hand up first, so seconded by Gary. Any questions, comments on the proposals? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, on to policy committee now.
For policies, if Kurt, if you could just come forward for the policy pieces. I know there's a number of these that you've helped to facilitate. Tonight, we do have a number of policies that are coming through for the second reading. During the first reading, there were some modifications that were requested, or some places that we needed to add some additional language. So we've gone through and addressed that in all of the requisite areas or requested areas. I guess I would open it up for any questions that you specifically have on any of the policies, or any items that you'd like to draw out or have more information with regards.
And we did have one comment from a member of the public regarding the equal educational opportunities.
Right. So with regards to that policy, there was some conversation that I had with a board member just about some additional information, which I included in your packet, that included some work that's occurred with the Office of Civil Rights, and then also some information that has occurred in other areas around the country as they've related to equity-related policies.
Now, did I also understand that other districts in the area have been addressing this? Yeah, okay, yeah, this is where you can help us.
Yeah, several of them have in the area already passed policies or have had policies in place for a while now. And when I first started to look at this policy, I used some of those model policies the other area districts have had, as well as language.
We're talking
from
about the equal
Office of
opportunities
Civil
one,
Rights.
okay.
Yes.
The equal opportunities
Yeah, okay.
one, yes.
Do we need to vote on each of these separately?
Well, actually, we can vote to approve all or pull something out for separate discussion,
You can do
similar
it
to
either
what we
way.
do on consent agenda.
You can do it either way.
So if the board would prefer to just have separate discussion on one or approve them all as is, that's a preference of the board. What I would suggest is that we do approve all for second reading except for 411, and then have just some discussion based on one of the questions that came up, in case there is a discussion, so.
So what you're recommending is the 342.11 recording IEPs.
Yep, medication.
Medication, student fees, facility regulations.
And the early graduation.
And the early graduation, and take those together.
Yep.
I move that we approve those
Okay.
new policies as
Second reading.
stipulated, with the
Mhm.
exception of
411.
the 411.
Yep, yep. Is there a second for Mark's motion?
Second.
I have one question or comment. I mean, I don't want to pull it. I think we should pass it, but just the one on the early graduation. It feels to me like we get more requests every year, and I guess part of that makes my heart hurt. I don't understand it, and I would really like to understand why students are requesting these better. I know you always forward us letters, but from a parent standpoint, from a student standpoint, high school's an important experience. It's made to last for 4 years for a reason. I wish people wouldn't be in such a rush. I don't like it. It feels like the trend is increasing. I wish it wasn't. Brian, do you have any statistics? Do you keep track? Could you give us like a 5-year trend of how many students have?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably
But
not.
I can comment real quickly on what I think is going on as well, unless you don't want me to. I can-
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay.
We love your comments.
Thank you. I mean, I can go back and I keep, emails, file of what the requests have been are coming through, but this is my bias, and my bias only is that the 4-year it's an artificial timeline. Because we have kids that could be done with high school in 2 years. We have students that can be done in 3. We have some students that take 5 or 6. I had a diploma last week I granted to a student that should have graduated, if we said 8 years ago, but he continued on and we got the diploma. So a lot of the research that's out there right now speaks to the senior year of high school. And I think what we have is a system, and I'm part of that system, that says because of statistics, graduation, students are supposed to graduate in 4 years. But we still talk a lot about, well, shouldn't we be differentiating for students? Shouldn't we be finding other ways to help them meet their needs? And if some students are mature enough, or their parents are feeling that they're mature enough to move on, then that, I think, is where the requests are coming from. And most of the requests are grounded in, again, work or getting ready to work because they feel they're ready to move on, they're done with high school. And we thankfully don't have, I think, a high percentage of those requests that are much different than other districts. I'm sure I could talk to other principals and do that. It'd be next September, because our meeting for this month is not going to happen now because everybody's busy in the Badger Conference. But part of it, again, I think, is, like I said, it's that aspect. We talk about senioritis all the time, and a lot of kids are, at the end of their junior year, our goal, I think, the thing that's difficult for us and challenging is to make sure that we have things from a curriculum standpoint, from an activity standpoint, that would keep students hopefully engaged for those 4 years. And I think we do. I mean, we see all the new courses we have, the programs that we have. Rarely do I have a request. I think you've had one that's come across in the last couple of years where it's been grounded, I would say, in social reasons, bullying, which is obviously of great concern to us, and we look back into that to address that and learn from that in terms of what this student or this family's experience was. But otherwise, for the most part, it's students that are working, want to work, want to start school early in some cases, that type of thing.
And work to earn some money so they can go on.
Or to go to school,
whatever. So
right.
it's all of that.
I don't have a problem with being taken out of the loop. It just hurts my heart. I think the 4 years of high school are important, and I wish people wouldn't be in such a rush.
But to your point, also, it's not always a wonderful experience for all students.
And again, some students,
Yes.
we would welcome some students staying 5 or 6, and we do, but that's not part of the equation either. Some students take longer, some students take less, and most take 4.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've had, I guess, just on the flip side, we had the conversation that's been where we have some folks who want to push it faster. They want to start earlier. They want to get early entry to kindergarten and get moving quicker. And I guess my personal opinion is savor the time you have.
Amen.
Because it's a great time, but there are different circumstances within every family. So that's the challenge.
Okay, are there any other questions on those proposed policies? Okay, the motion is on the table to approve of those, except pulling one out for separate discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Any questions or comments on 411, equal educational opportunities? And if you wanted to provide, you said information, there's other districts that are.
Yeah, there's several other districts across the state, across the nation, who have changed in their policies and have adopted language very similar to ours. Our policy was actually written by our attorney that we contract with, and he used examples that I gave to him from area districts, other districts that he's worked with, guidance from the Office of Civil Rights, to come up with the language that is in this policy draft.
Some of the language refers to ancestry, national origin, and creed, and things like that as well. So.
I think the items that Kurt's talking about, where it's really a rewrite of our equal educational opportunities policy. Is that really what we've done? Is added some additional language to an existing policy.
Okay, first, Mark.
Kurt, the way I read it, my understanding is if I'm a student who feels a need for additional privacy, my needs can be met somehow through that policy. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable because a transgender is making me feel uncomfortable within my locker room area, whatever, I can address to have my own personal safety needs taken care of. Is that do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of what we, as I was putting this together, and I think I mentioned last month, or I know I mentioned it for sure in the policy committee meeting, is that I wanted to approach this as making everybody feel comfortable, and I think I gave the example back to my days of in the middle school locker room, where I didn't feel that comfortable with
I was thinking the same thing.
others
in terms of
around.
High
So-
school girls.
So, and I think we're looking facility-wise by changing some of our, what now have been identified as disabled restrooms into just restrooms
Right.
that can be used by anybody who chooses to use a single stall restroom. We're looking, we had a conversation today briefly about looking at our locker rooms to see what modifications we would need to make in those as well to make them more comfortable for anyone to use. So we're looking at those things as well as we're looking at the implementation of this.
Brian? Hello, Brian, we get to get you again. I think it was my understanding that basically what's in the policy has basically been already being done at the high school. That we're really not changing anything we've already been doing. We're just in effect creating the policy now to kind of match what you've been doing anyway.
Yeah, what we do is, again, the counselors will obviously have conversations with the students and their parents. They will then let me know if those conversations have occurred. I'll have a conversation with the students and the parent, asking them basically, you know, to formalize for me what their rationale is and what their plan is, because I want to know that they have a plan in place. And then that's, you know, again, that conversation will occur, and then typically at that point is where you've received the memo from me and the request from the parent, and we've taken that action. So I think, again, at this point, what you would be doing is hopefully having the confidence that I'm still going to continue to have those conversations and make sure that a student has a plan, and go and, you know, just go forward from that standpoint. So yes, Dave, I think that's basically what the policy is reflecting, is that things would continue along that same vein in terms of the conversations. It would just be that I'd be able to make that decision rather than bringing it forward to you.
And I think that's an important thing as we sit here and look at this is we're really not changing what's already happened. We're not creating a new situation or a new difficulty or a new thing. All we're doing is creating the policy to match where, in a weird way, society's already gotten ahead of us anyway. And the high school has already been doing it. So I think the fear that there's going to be some problem because of this policy, if that were true, we'd already be having it. And I don't think we're having it.
We've also followed that same process that Brian just described at the intermediate and middle schools as well this year. So it's kind of being applied throughout the district.
You know, I think we're doing it with the bathrooms, but I think the comments that are coming up are the shower areas for athletics and things like that. You know, where you've got, you know, the mix. And I can see in the bathrooms where you can, you know, you've got the stalls, we can put stalls in, we've got unisex bathrooms and so forth. But what is our plan, you know, to work with our locker rooms? I think if we've got a plan going forward where we can work with the locker rooms, where you have a little bit more privacy for people, I think this is probably easier to swallow.
And that was the exact conversation that we had this morning, and we also know that we need to involve Joe Bellamo in that conversation too, with the facilities person. So that's a conversation that we've had very briefly, but you're right, that's the one area that is more challenging just by nature of what a locker room is.
So what has been happening?
I jumped in the wrong conversation, which I apologize for.
Yep.
The wrong part of the policy. I mean, what I would say right now is and I apologize if I missed some of this, but the impetus, which I thought was great, is that it came forward from the students, at least in terms of initially having the consideration of the conversation about the gender neutral restrooms and how could we do that or facilitate that. And from my perspective, I know when I happened to be out even in like Middleton, Cross Plains, and Glacier Creek this year, I noticed that most of their signage at the middle school had become gender neutral. So that was what we did, was I talked to the students that had come to me said, well, what can we do in the hallways that would make, and their suggestion was again, okay, we've got the staff restrooms that are there, and simply removing the staff sign because it already has, in essence, the, the gender neutral signage on there, male, female. We just took the staff off. We did the same thing in the guidance counseling office. We have the same scenario in the office. Now, if you get in the locker room situation, frankly, what I would say, Dave, is there hasn't been anything that's been done along those lines right now because that has not come forward to me as being a concern from the students. Could it be? Do we need to be proactive with that? Yeah, I think that we do. But for right now, the only conversations that I've had that have come forward to me have been specific to the restroom areas in the hallways and had students being able to have access to that. I talked to the faculty 4 or 5 months ago, yes, now at a faculty meeting and said, please let me know if you have any concerns about this that you're not comfortable with speaking to a large group, and I had none that came back from that way.
Perhaps as a board, we should ask Brian and Kurt to come forward with a plan for next school year to address a locker room concern before it happens.
I would
be a little bit more proactive.
I would ask, probably too respectfully that Aaron be part of those conversations.
Right,
because
right.
it's gonna be,
Yeah, I would,
It's gotta be a bigger conversation.
It's a bigger conversation, yeah. Okay, you want to say, Randy?
No, I was just adding that I think there's more
Yeah.
people that need to be part
Right,
of
no,
that.
I would, yeah.
I would suggest that we delay this until at least we've got an understanding of how we're gonna deal with the locker rooms. Delay the passage, yes.
I don't think what this says here makes that necessary to delay it, does it?
I mean, because we're talking process at this point. I mean, because the policy was, and help me, because I wasn't on the policy committee discussion. I'm trying to find where in here we're talking about. I mean, it's really, as Brian indicated, that's the process that they go through. And you've been reacting to any questions or issues raised by students. Okay.
And part of it, again, real briefly here, I'll add, is the students' conversations have been very appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Students are wise, and I mean that in a good way, to, if you take a look at our building mission, vision, and value statement, and it speaks to safe environment, equity, that type of thing, there's a balance there, obviously, because we obviously respectful of the comments that were shared earlier. It's all students, but that's the goal, and that's the challenge, is having all students, no matter what, however they may identify from their own sexuality, is having them feel comfortable coming into the school. And so that'll be a conversation, again, like I think I've been hearing here, that's going to need to continue to be ongoing, and certainly involve not just students, but staff and parents and the community too, I mean, from the standpoint of where they perceive things.
Well, and then I'm looking at the language in the policy. It's basically, if there is an individual that has a specific request regarding that, it's going to be, there's factors that will be considered. I mean, it's not like we have to say this is exactly how it's going to be handled and how we're going to, I mean, the policy language is written in a way which suggests that, outside of the policy language, there may be other things that are going to be happening to more clearly define either the guidelines or
To let you
whatever
work it
behind,
Right.
as opposed to having it articulated in policy.
Yeah, what it says is in your request, I'm going to skip out some of the language, but it says it will be considered on a case-by-case basis,
Yes.
taking into account the relevant interests of the student, meaning the student making the request, the district, and other students potentially affected by the request. So it's going to be, as Brian talked earlier, it's going to be a case-by-case
It's process.
decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel comfortable in the way at least that the policy's written in terms of what the role of the policy is versus administrative actions that as a result of what it says, if there's a specific question or issue that comes up.
And so far, it really only involves bathrooms, correct? Because we
No.
don't
Shower
require.
rooms in here too.
Well, I mean,
It's already involved showers and locker rooms.
but like with our PE classes, we don't require our students to shower, right?
But there are certain curriculums, i.e. swim,
Yeah,
where it does become an issue.
swim would be the one.
And you know, I am aware that that's being handled on a
By
case-by-case
case
basis.
basis.
And to the satisfaction of the families involved.
That's right.
Okay, good.
Good.
So,
Good point.
and I
Thank
think the
you.
language addresses that, but
Yeah.
I still think it would be prudent on our part to have a team of administration who
Yep.
are involved with the issues to come up with a proactive guideline
Yeah,
before it becomes
an issue.
in case it becomes an issue
If it
down
does.
the road.
But the policy
But the
language
policy itself, I think, stands
is
on its
written in a way that enables that.
I think maybe a simpler way to look at this is the policy is about equal opportunity.
Yep.
And
Yes.
it creates a thing to say that transgender or creed or race or whatever will not be a barrier to equal opportunity.
Exactly.
And then it says, this is what we're supposed to try and do to make that happen. It doesn't say, this is how we're going to build a locker room.
Exactly.
It doesn't say, this is how a student of a certain religion, that their religion will be recognized during testing time when they have a high holy day or whatever the case may be. It doesn't go into those exact details. So I'm not sure where holding up the policy is somehow going to change the concept of equal opportunity.
Yes.
And I think we can make a statement of equal opportunity without saying how we're going to build a shower. That seems like a secondary action afterwards. But we're going to say, I think it's important that we say that the equal opportunity will be provided.
Yes, and that's why it's an equal opportunity policy. Yes. Good point, thank you for that.
How does
Gary.
this, how does this affect general public outside of our students?
Oh, good question.
Well, it's,
You're not interviewing them, you're not scrutinizing them.
And it would apply to, it really applies to everybody. It's a different, it's really not even a different law that applies to general population or employees for that matter. It's all encompassing under the same federal guidelines and rules. So it does really apply to anybody who comes into our facilities. This policy specifically addresses the equal opportunities for students because
Yeah.
that's who we serve. But
Yeah.
it does impact anyone who would come into our building.
Well, and then the first statement, the first sentence is, the school district is committed and dedicated to the task of providing the best education possible for every child in the district for as long as the student can benefit from attendance and the student's conduct is compatible with the welfare of the entire student body. I mean, that just kind of says, okay, that the focus is on that, and then it talks about all of the rights of the students and differences that we are all serving. So.
I get that, but I'm not talking about the students.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other people who work.
We use our facilities and they are public. So, I mean, short of an expectation that we're gonna lift people's skirts on their way in and out of the restrooms, I mean, I don't know, what's the district's responsibility on that? I mean,
Well, I don't think it's any different than what's the district's responsibility to check what your religion is when you come in.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would be the same.
It's-
That's right.
This is
It's not.
about an equal opportunity
That's
policy,
right.
not
Yes.
about,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to decide why we're treating that any differently than
Yeah.
any of the other issues listed under equal opportunity. I mean,
Well, I
if,
think there is a difference. So all I'm asking for is a plan as to what are we going to do in these situations.
but isn't that secondary to the concept of equal opportunity?
And the policy, having a policy of equal
I
opportunity.
will not support this without a plan. So
So,
if you want to vote on it, I will not support it without a plan going forward. You know, so that we know, you know, how some of these situations are going to be handled. You know, this is, I think, different than religion. I think it's different than gender. I'm not against it, but I want to understand how we're going to handle it.
I think the challenging part of that would be you can have a global way that you could handle it, but my experience would tell me that
there could be a multitude of different,
Exceptions to policy.
well, I didn't want to say exceptions potentially, but circumstances that would potentially, you need some flexibility built into that policy in terms of how you may wish to proceed, because, you know, under this umbrella of equal opportunity, even under the umbrella of how individuals, if we go back to, you know, the LBGT community, there's a whole lot of variance within that umbrella
Expression.
of what the accommodation may be along those lines too. So I hear what you're saying, Jack, that, but I think again, it may be challenging to find a one-size-fits-all, but to have some general steps in place, I certainly understand the need for that.
I think what we could do in trying to meet your request, Jack, is to give you some of the things that we will consider, but I don't think we could give a lockstep, this is how it's going to be. But these are the things that, as we meet with families and students, these are the things that we will discuss.
Potential options.
I think
Not only
And
that,
I
but
think
just
that's
the
the-
things to consider to
Right.
say,
You know, I think those are the things that, you know, and maybe it doesn't have to be in policy, but if we have an understanding of how do we handle these situations going forward, then it makes it easier. You know, because when you're dealing with 7th and 8th grade kids and there's situations, the bathrooms I'm not worried about. You know, it's the showers. You know, if we're going into showers, you know, we've got different religions, different beliefs, and you know, just what are some of the things that we're going to do so that we make everybody feel comfortable? You know, because
I gotta say, I have a
It's
real
more
problem
privacy
with
is
this.
what that is.
We have a policy on expulsion. But when we look at the expulsion of a student, we look at it as a case-by-case basis. And we often treat different students in the exact same situation differently because of their case, because of something that's going on. To sit here and say that equal opportunity will now be defined exactly or given exact definition on it, are we going to go into the, you know, part of the equal opportunity is about bullying. Are we going to say exactly how we're going to handle every single bully in the school? Because we need to define all that?
I'm not sure, Dave, you're listening, because we're looking at guidelines as to what direction we could potentially go in.
But that's just it. I'm saying this is a policy. This is not an implementation plan. We're making a statement that there is an educational equal opportunity for all of these different classifications. And I don't see why we have a problem saying these students will have the same educational opportunities as all others. And I don't think we need to sit there and in that policy, or before we even approve the concept, we have to know, well, are we going to give them an opportunity that's okay with other people? Is their educational opportunity going to be approved only because other people are comfortable with it? I think we're just making a statement that all the students are going to have an educational opportunity.
Okay, what we are talking about here is an equal opportunity policy framework. We have other policies, I'm trying to think, it's usually in your area, Kurt, where you have the policy identifying that this is the district's responsibility to have something in place to deal with the situation. And then there's supportive rules, and there's, in some cases, binders, you know, that outline specific actions on the part of staff on how you handle certain situations. And it sounds like the question here is not on policy, I don't think, or it shouldn't be. I mean, because that's not the role of policy, but in terms of the implementation or the rules behind a policy. And the dialogue here is this policy language, and the just further discussion is, okay, the implementation of the policy and how it may be different than how we're currently implementing it, which it sounds like we've already been doing a pretty good job with things so far, but there's there are other things that we want to be able to more clearly articulate to a wider group of individuals. So as a result, the question on the table is, do we want to, support the second reading of the policy saying that we should be, in general, as a district, we want to be providing an environment that recognizes differences and enables all students to feel safe and warm, and basically in the language as it's written, and we've added a few new categories and definitions, but after that, it's the steps we've been talking about in terms of like help me to understand what this means when it comes to either facilities, or when it comes in terms of processes or communication. From my perspective, I'm just thinking that the policy is fine, and it's really the implementation of the policy that there's a question about. And we've had an equal opportunity policy in place. It's being more rewritten now, I guess expanded to, we have one in place already. It was in 2005. It's the last, it was implemented, I think, in '94. And it references, programs for students with disabilities, discrimination, harassment, Title IX, school-age parents, sexual harassment, all that, and special ed handbook. Those are all of the cross-references and exhibits that are already attached to this from prior approvals of the equal opportunity policy. And all we're doing is we're saying, okay, there's a few other areas that we want to be incorporating or be sensitive to. And there will be another cross-reference to either other handbooks or things like that as it relates to the implementation. Make a long story short, our role as a board is putting in place policy to help guide the actions. And I for one, am supportive of the policy as written, sensitive to the questions that are coming up in terms of how it's going to be implemented, but we've got something in place already, and at the very least, if a majority of the board wants to say no, we want to do something different, we still have a policy in place that's effective, but we want to be able to be more sensitive to some of the issues that are being discussed these days.
Then I would like to make a motion to approve the policy.
That's already been.
No, we haven't,
No, we
because this
haven't
is the
yet.
separate discussion. We pulled it out before.
You pulled up before.
So we have a motion to approve of the policy as written.
We approved the other policies.
Yep, I got
it.
So then this was the standing.
I'll second. Oh.
Okay, there's a motion by Dave, seconded by Julie. Any other further comments?
I've got some.
Yes.
In reading this, and I get it, and I'm gonna vote for this policy because by everything I've gathered with the law, you're not gonna do that fight. But to Jack's point, I asked this question when this came up, before this came up here, where we're doing policy stuff on how we're gonna handle it in the new school. What do we do? I don't know. What did we do? What did we change or do in the new school, which we weren't prepared for this when we did? Did we do some changes?
We have some, to correct term, gender neutral bathrooms. So some of those aspects to it.
To what degree?
How many? Are you asking how many?
In my book, as we went there, we should have actually also kind of done some major changes in that, or some hugely different locker room separation pieces where we could handle some of this and did that. Did we do that?
Right.
And so to Jack's point in saying, what are we doing with this?
Right.
We better get proactive with some of this stuff. If we're accepting this policy and saying we are going to do this, what are we doing?
Right.
To that point, I think what we've got to do is start looking at how do we lay out our locker rooms, our shower areas.
I get that, but,
things
and I agree with you to that point, but I also see what they're saying, and I just look at the legal fight of, the way they do the definition part of this is, and what has been established so far by law, Randy, if I'm correct with that?
That's what I provided.
It's a thing, but we need to get a hold of what we're doing. I get the equal rights thing and all that, aspects of that. But we've had this come here already. It was brought up at a meeting. I said, let's say, what are we doing? I don't know what we did. I'm asking now. But was it enough then when we had an opportunity to make a change and do something, was it enough?
Right.
And then we should have been saying to the rest of our schools, how are we going to change this going forward if we have to buy equipment or stalls or whatever we're doing, or entryways, or can we change the whole area? And then it ends up being a pretty big fiscal thing every time you think it's so easy just to change that, and it isn't. Just like a walkway over a road or whatever. And that all has to get looked at in the budgets that we're in and how we're doing stuff. Not that I'm saying it's a money issue, but it is a money issue. Because to do a big change, and you hire an architect and get the builders to change when you already got them set is a big thing, even at that level.
Yeah, I think our approach at the new intermediate school has been really the gender-neutral bathrooms. There isn't a large locker room facility at the new school, so there is no locker room shower areas at the school. It's a 5th and 6th grade building. I don't think, Steve, we have locker rooms built into there, if I recall.
I think there are.
What's that?
Yeah, there's shower facilities.
There might be. I'd have to. I got to look into that part to be.
But you see what I'm saying?
I
So
do.
to the point of it, and we could have been ahead on one building.
I think this policy goes as far as we can for now, and I think the expectation is, like it has been with many things, we are trusting our administrators' judgment to handle things on a case-by-case basis. And to the extent that that is no longer working, they need to come back to us and raise their hand and say, we've got to figure out a different solution, these are some other suggestions, and it's going to take bigger commitment and more support from other directions. But until, I think this is as forward-thinking as we can be for now. You raise a great point in terms of the intermediate school, but you know, how could we have?
First,
This is an issue that has bubbled to the surface over the last year. I mean,
Just this school year. really.
that's right.
Okay, any other comments? There's a motion and a second on the table to approve of the second reading of 411 as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you.
so do we need to make a statement about what we would like to have?
I think the message has been received.
Or is it clear enough to proceed?
I think it's clear enough to proceed. I think what we would do is, well,
I think for the sake of the public, we certainly ought to have kind of an end date by which we would like to have a guideline. And recognizing it's not necessarily a checklist, but
From my standpoint, I'm an equal opportunity guy, but in this case, there's a lot of uncomfortable situations on both sides, and having more information, to your point, given to the community is probably prudent.
yeah, and I think it speaks to the voices in the community.
That's right.
do you want that coming back to the full board first? Do you want it going through a committee first? Is there a preference from the board?
I just want to just bring it back to the
Full
board.
To the full board.
Okay. All right.
I do think it's important to say, though, that a lot of this has already been happening. And part of the problem with this is people acting like it is a huge problem for the students. Yet, as we heard, it's been going on without the policy, and I'm not seeing a rush of students having a problem. I am seeing a rush of students who we've had expulsions over sexual issues that were not having anything to do with LGBT. Yet I'm not seeing parents come rushing in here saying, please protect our students.
I think
That's why I want to make it clear that let's not turn a simple issue of dealing with an equal opportunity issue into some sort of massive problem when we have bigger problems in other areas that actually have more direct effect.
Okay, I'd like Randy to make a closing comment on this.
I guess my final comments here is we'll bring back the guidelines that you've asked for and try to identify some of those things to help with the discussion. But I think it's to someone's point, I'm not sure who made it a few minutes ago. One of the things our administrators in the buildings do and all of our staff do is you work with kids where they're at. And we get lots of kids with lots of needs every single day. So the policy that you're seeing is really, as Brian had said, we have more and more students that he's working with. You have Marcy's working with students, Chris is working with students, and identifying that there are some areas that we need to have some policy that follows that. But I understand where the board is coming from with regards to wanting some additional guidelines and understanding. And to be honest, we're finding our way through that. I mean, as Kurt alluded to, we were having discussions just this morning on this topic as it relates to specifics of things that we're seeing within our schools. So many of these things I think are evolving, and as Brian stated, they will continue to evolve and be unique. but we can bring back some of the general guidelines and have a discussion to help to articulate some of the things that we see as options to help kids.
Awesome.
Great, thank you. Insurance Committee. There's a recommendation that's coming out of the Insurance Committee. And Gary and Joan are actually our representatives on the Insurance Committee, but would you summarize
But
what?
Steve is our spokesperson.
Steve is the spokesperson.
Steve is our spokesperson.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Thank you, Peggy.
Yeah.
The Insurance Committee is a long-standing board staff administration committee that meets regularly throughout the school year to take a look at health and dental and other insurance recommendations. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was really the renewal rate. We're in the renewal season. This year it's a little bit different than the norm because we've entered into a long-term contract with Dean. We did discuss that last year. The long-term contract calls for a maximum 5% increase in the health insurance premium. There is a 5% increase through our long-term contract. It is justified based on the claims ratio. That information was shared with the insurance committee. On the dental insurance side, we have a self-insured dental program. The insurance committee reviewed those numbers. There was some discussion whether a 5% increase was high enough or whether we should look at something like 7%. The dental insurance program has been working on a deficit this year compared to previous years. After the discussion, the committee felt comfortable with the 5% recommendation, just like the health insurance. Just one quick point. We would like the opportunity at the June board meeting, if there is enough time in the agenda, to probably have about a 15 or 20 minute conversation really on this topic. We knew there was a lot on the agenda tonight, so we made a decision to kind of hold off for another month to really discuss with the entire board where are we at with our long-term contract with Dean. What is the information that we're seeing this year? What have we done with wellness programs and initiatives this year? What has been some of our successes? And as the program moves forward for next year, what's next on the docket, so to speak? And so we'd really like to have that opportunity, either the June meeting or July meeting, to have that discussion at the full board, with the full board. But what's on the docket for tonight is a recommendation from the insurance committee to approve health and dental insurance recommendations at a 5% level. Those numbers have already been built into the first draft of the budget that you saw earlier tonight. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on this agenda item.
Steve, I was just a little confused. My computer's dead now, but
So is mine.
it needs a new battery.
So we'll just have to talk.
But when I looked at there was like 6 or 7 different options at the 5% of the kind. Whereas some of them you had to try, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 was different. And so I guess I was just confused. Is there one specific in the handout that you were promoting or?
Sure, yes, I know what you're referring to. In the attachment, there's different levels of insurance. There's insurance that people who've retired who can purchase from us, and there were different sheets in the larger renewal. My Chromebook happened to die just like your iPad did, so I can't pull it up right now, but there was a sheet in there that was for current employees.
Right.
And that was the one that listed the 5% renewal rate. I can't tell right now if there's a third or the fourth page, but there was one applicable to current employees. The other ones were applicable to different scenarios based on whether you were active, Medicare, et cetera.
Okay.
Your surface just keep cranking.
So basically, the 5% we're looking at provides the identical benefits at the identical cost to what we have.
Yeah, it's a great point. So
Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So the renewal rate at the 5% does not change any of the benefits. There's no recommendations to make changes. The benefits are remaining the same as they were in the current year, with just a 5% rate renewal.
Okay.
Gary, did you have a comment?
This all just comes down to what they take in for premiums, what we have for occurrences or things, and where that comes in at. The question would be, to Steve, is where that finished in the last time, because I missed the last meeting. But, so we are guaranteed a 5% increase because of a contract thing we did for a little bit ago. We're trying to do the wellness program and the other programs to get that so it's a more sustainable lower, so we cannot have huge increases the next time. My question is, where did we come at this last time?
We have a calculated premium rate of 22.
Wow.
A what?
A calculated premium rate of 22, so.
Justified by the use.
22% increase, you mean?
Without the agreement.
If we weren't in this contract. And I don't know where they would negotiate that out at.
Because
I
the
don't-
costs are that much higher.
You're saying there.
What we're processing, what they're saying.
Premiums versus what our actual expenses are.
So,
Experience ratio.
Now, there's a gray area with all that, because they get their
yeah,
administration
because
and all that out
they'll
of there,
negotiate
depending
that
on what you.
down. But we may have been at 15%, would have been very reasonable at a 22% calculated if we weren't in this 5%. So, and I think you'll share this next month, but one thing that's coming out in the new employee guideline books is we need to have participation in that wellness program, and we're gonna have differentiated rates based on participation.
Or a
And we need
biometric
that.
screening.
Joan, is that also for the non-employee spouses?
There was a secretary section.
Yeah, it'd be anybody that's covered.
Right.
Anybody that's covered.
We need a certain level of participation to maintain this 5%, one more year, and then I don't know where it'll go.
So is this the second?
Okay, and again, Dave,
This will be third year, entering third year of 5%.
okay, Dave, comment?
We're going into the third year
This will
on
be the
this,
third
if I
year.
recall. So this is the year where it could be anywhere from 5 to 8, right?
No,
No, because
we got it
had
fifth.
that year where they didn't bring the nurse on board as fast as they had promised.
So
So
they gave
then
us.
we got another year.
So this is the 5% year. Next year will be the 5 to 8% year. Because if we go below 65, then we get the 3% added on. When I was looking through, the only thing I was seeing on the health and wellness was the $150 you can get credited per year, right? So it doesn't change your premium, you just get $150. If you use your Fitbit enough or whatever the case is. I gotta admit, I couldn't find, you probably didn't provide it, it's probably way too detailed what it really takes to do that. But their concept was that they're gonna adjust the percentage. What they might offer us next year is gonna depend a lot on how many people do
Correct.
What they're
the
asking.
plan. But they're not willing to say what that really is.
We do have a table which we're going to present in the presentation next month that really outlines all of that.
Also, it wasn't in our packet.
It's not in the packet
Okay.
this month, but we do want to share kind of the future of this program as well as the accomplishments that we made this year. And this year has been a number of accomplishments in many different areas. So we're excited to show you all that at the next meeting. But we do want to just highlight some of that information. As a good reminder to what Joan brought up tonight is the tie into our handbooks and really how we're moving into an era where a higher level of participation in the wellness programs is critical.
So I guess then, based on if there's any other, if people have other questions, they should just kind of shoot them to you so that whatever gets presented at our next meeting then can reflect the majority of the questions that are received. So, okay. Consent agenda. We have a number of items on the consent agenda, approval of checks, some gifts and field trips. Also the the administrative change, the HR changes we talked about in closed session, and summer school recommendations. So I can entertain a motion for all of the items, or if somebody wants to pull something out separately for separate consideration, we can do that as well.
I move we take the consent agenda as a large group and approve them all.
I second that.
Motion by Mark, second by Julie. Questions, comments on any items? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We gotta go back insurance.
Oh, okay.
There was never a motion to approve the 5% increase. Is there never board
Oh,
action?
well, you were looking for, I was under the impression something was coming back next month.
Just information.
Ah, okay. Sorry about that. Okay,
make
so
the
thank you.
motion.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve of the 5% in premium increase.
I'll make a motion to approve the 5% in both health and dental.
Second.
Joan, seconded by Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for catching that. Okay, on to board business, your community.
Yeah, the board business piece, I've had some communication with all of you via email just about some community engagement aspects. Peggy, Julie, and I met here a few weeks ago and just reviewed some feedback with regards to the linkage meeting that we were discussing holding this spring. We've decided to hold off on that at this point, given just, I guess, some broad feedback across the table. What I'm recommending, I just wanted your feedback on, was really wanting to bring this back at the June and July meeting, carve out some time at both of those meetings to have some dialogue around community engagement. I want to go back to the school perception survey that we did as part of the referendum, because part of that included some community engagement aspects, and really bring that back to the board so that we can have a discussion about where we want to go with this part of our strategic plan for the future. So I think if we can talk about in June, July, administratively, then we can bring back a recommendation at the August meeting so that we can have a plan moving forward into the fall. So I guess I just was looking for your feedback on I guess that concept of the June, July discussions, August presentation on a plan for that, and then looking to work with the board on something for this fall.
Sounds good.
That's good. Anything to add?
I just want to say, I'm disappointed we didn't have it. I think rolling out what we've done with the strategic plan and the vision and mission was worthy enough topic for discussion, and it would have closed the loop and been another opportunity to get that whole piece out in front of the public. So majority's majority. I'm glad we're moving on. It definitely needs more discussion. We do need to make, I believe, more attempt to engage with the public on things not related to asking for money for referendums. So.
Great.
Okay, on to future agendas and meetings. First of all, I'm assuming everybody will be here on Wednesday for the reorg meeting?
5:30.
5:30? Yeah, it's going to be a relatively short one. We were hoping to have some other things after that, but unless you have some other items you're going to be
No, if you'll just pass it down if you're talking, that would be great.
So do you have a guesstimate, maybe about an hour?
3.5.
No, maybe less than that
Half hour.
sometimes. Yeah, it's usually not that.
How contested
Yeah,
the races
maybe
can be.
Didn't you have somebody coming? Nick Mishler is coming, isn't
Well,
he?
I couldn't do that.
That got canceled because it's also the night of the senior awards and the senior art.
So
that
the
wasn't-
students
it doesn't
couldn't
work
present
that
their
night.
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, that was,
So-
we were hoping that we could align it up with that.
So if I can just for a second here, Peggy, what I've handed out is I've revisited really our 90-day timelines. We've done these the last couple different iterations this year. So what I've laid out is really between now and August. We sat down administratively today to look at what are some of our needs with committees, et cetera, moving forward. We've had a lot of work that's happened this school year. Some of the things with facility and all those other areas are coming to a point where we've moved most of those in front of you. So our next 90 days is a little bit slower. But what you can see on there is the 9th is tonight, the 10th is curriculum committee meeting tomorrow. Curriculum is on the 23rd. Special board meeting on the, oops, I should have out of order. The 11th is, that's what Peggy was talking about. That's really what I wanted to articulate. The only meeting we feel we need right now, between now and the June meeting, is a budget meeting sometime in that first week of June or before the June board meeting. So that would be June 1st through probably ideally through probably like the 7th or 8th. Is there a day that works?
And we still have the current budget committee members because we don't have, it's not until a reorg that people then can sign up for our committees, and it would be the following meeting that we would have committee assignments made based on preferences.
So Wednesdays are the best.
Steve, when would you prefer, the 1st or the 8th, if you're looking at a Wednesday?
Can we do it in the morning? Sure, that
Yeah.
works.
That's fine.
8 o'clock?
Is the first, would you be ready on the 1st, Steve, or do you want to go a
No,
little
I
later?
could be there. It's fine.
What about June 1st?
Should be good.
Perfect.
June 1, 8 in the morning. Do it today, it doesn't matter what day for me, it's better for anybody.
So is, other than the curriculum committee, that's
all I
that's
need
all?
for now.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because everything's after the next. regular
Everything
board
else
meeting.
comes co-curriculars, we'll get
Got it.
probably the June timeframe, we'll set them at the next meeting. So for right now, that's all we need.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Jack, seconded by Dave, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good night.
All opposed, stay here by yourself.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Continue board discussion.
Did you see what happened with the Middleton football field?
Yes, they got,
Yes.
yes.
Did you see how much it's gonna cost to
It's-
replace
Their
it?
AstroTurf is junk.
Dave?
You're kidding me.
The company is refusing to replace it.